and administrators on some of the proposals that have been put forth. So we appreciate your flexibility in moving that date a couple of times.
Travis, hold on 1 second.
I sure can.
YouTube is not live yet, so we want to make sure.
Are we good now? Okay. All right. So it seems like our YouTube feed was a little behind, so we were just letting that get caught up. Again, want to commend all of our wrestlers, all of our coaches on a fine season this year. Congratulations to all of our state champions, both individual and our team champions. Committee, I want to thank you for taking time to be here today and for the hours that you put in throughout this year. We rely on your help and we appreciate all of your participation and everything you do to support wrestling in the state of Colorado. All right. Do we have Mr. Kruger available or should I keep moving along?
We can go ahead and he'll jump on as soon as he gets here.
Okay. Sandy, do you want to go ahead and do roll call real quick?
Yeah, and if you could just stay here, that would be very helpful. Sean from Rocky Ford,
Here.
Matt Brown from Ray,
Here.
Jeff Cherokee Trail,
Here.
Sandra from Chatfield,
Here.
Rachel from Meade,
Here.
John from Durango,
I do not see John.
Pat DeCamillis, Silver Creek,
Here. Here.
Rick from Fort Lupton, Tom, Eagle Valley,
Here.
Jason from Prairie View.
Here. Okay. And for those that don't know, my name is Travis Steiner and I am the wrestling committee chair currently. Okay. As we move on, before we get into a couple of other things, please note on your agenda, we are going to try and move up the presentations by Ernie Derrera. He has got a class conflict today, so we're going to get him going here in just a few minutes. We're going to try and put him in right after our officials report from Rossi. Before we get started, I just want to take a few minutes to review our purpose of this committee and the charge that we have for the state of Colorado. First, as our purpose, we are to help create and recommend the rules that govern the sport of wrestling for the state of Colorado. We put forth our recommendation to the legislative body, the legislative council, to be voted upon and to be enacted for CHSAA. So understand that everything that we do here today is a recommendation that we put forward to the legislative council, and then it is the legislative council's responsibility to approve that and make that official as it goes forward for next year and for years to come. Note that we really focus on just the general rules and procedures that govern the sport throughout the course of the season. This committee does not necessarily oversee and look at every fine detail that we have in regards to operating the state tournament. That operation of the tournament really falls under John Sullivan, our assistant commissioner's purview, and those that he designates on the tournament committee. They are in charge of putting that tournament on and making sure that it runs smoothly and efficiently. So while if we have comments and suggestions, we can give those to John for things that we notice and what we see, and we feel strongly we can make a recommendation as a committee, but understand that the operation of the tournament, really that is John's responsibility and not necessarily that of this committee. Our committee is a representation of all of classes in geography across the state of Colorado. We're diverse in nature intentionally so that we can represent 2A through 5A on the boys side, and then 5A on the girls side. We have representation geographically across the state because Colorado is such a diverse state when it comes to geography, and we do have some limitations that occur at times. And so it's important for us to have a diverse population on our committee. That's why you see the different people here in front of you. As we move forward in our decision making today, a couple things to remember. One, I think it's important that we move forward in an intentional manner. I think that we need to make sure that we honor those thoughts and ideas that have come before us. The policies and procedures that have been put in place that we're using, that has come from the breadth of knowledge across wrestling throughout its history here in our state. We haven't got here just by accident. There have been intentional decisions that have gotten us to this point and where we are currently and how we govern the sport in the state of Colorado. So as we make decisions, I want us to make sure that we honor where we currently are and how we got here. Also, I think it's important that we progress forward in an intentional manner. The state has evolved over the years, wrestling has evolved over the years, and so does our sport. And we need to make sure that we move forward in an intentional manner and we serve kids in the best way that we can. So while we will move forward, while we will make maybe some progressive decisions here, let's again keep in mind where we've been, how we got here, and where we're going, and make sure we do things in an intentional manner. My role today is to be our chair of the meeting and to help us stay organized and stay focused. Please note that I am not a voting member currently. I do not vote in any of our procedures unless there is a tie. John's role throughout all of this is, again, he's our assistant commissioner. He is our CHSAA representative that is in charge of enforcing all of the rules that we put forward as an association. John has done a fantastic job this year with the help of Sandra, and we're very fortunate to have them here in the CHSAA office helping us. As we make decisions today, John will offer his input. His input is valuable and crucial to our process, as he's the one that really puts all of these procedures in place. He's the one that does the follow through and makes sure that things are going to happen and that they're going to work. So we need his input as to how he sees this happening for us in the future and what implications that will be. So John will jump in quite often today. We work in tandem here to oversee wrestling. And so whenever he feels like there's something to be addressed, he is welcome to jump in and do so. And then as a committee, again, our role is to make the best decisions possible for wrestling in the state of Colorado. Please remember, we are trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of the sport of wrestling in general across all of the state. We may have to put aside our individual ideas, maybe what's best for our school at the time, to do what's best for the state. So again, our charge is to do what's best for for wrestling in the state of Colorado in general, and not necessarily just our own specific school. As a committee member, any committee member can put forward a recommendation for us to vote upon for potential rule change or procedure change moving forward. Any committee member that makes a motion, like I said, is free to do so. Any motion will need a second in order to be voted upon. So any motion that comes forward must be seconded. At that point, we can have some additional discussion if we need to, and then we will call for a vote on those motions. In our format today, we need a simple majority to pass or fail any motion that's put forward. And like I mentioned before, if there is a tie, then I will act as that tiebreaker in that vote. Also, one point to note, if we have multiple motions that affect the same topic, the motion that is passed most recently, is the one that is enacted. So whichever one may be passed first isn't necessarily the one that goes into play. The one that happens second, the one that is most recent, that supersedes any previous motions or any previous action passed. So if we do have multiple motions that deal with a certain topic today, again, we'll try and streamline and hope that doesn't happen, but just understand that whichever one passes second, that is the one that goes in on the record. Also, because we've got a virtual meeting today, I want to make sure that we establish a couple of norms. One, everybody's voice is important on this committee. Again, we have a diverse committee for a reason, and everybody's voice is important, and we want you all to be heard. If you have a comment to make, please speak up. Please do so. And notice, please make note that in an absence of comment, if you choose not to comment, that our norm in this meeting is that that's going to be that you agree with the comments that are taking place and you agree with the direction that we are headed. If you do not agree with the direction we are headed, please speak up. Please do so we can hear your voice and we can hear what thoughts you have. But otherwise, if you are agreeable with where we're going, then no comment is necessary. Okay, I'm looking around to see. I do not see Mr. Kruger available yet. So when he gets here, he will jump in. John, do you have anything to add before we move forward in our agenda?
Including today, there's still going to be some work to do after today to make sure everything's where it needs to be. But I've been just so happy and excited to work with you all, and I want to thank you. Also want to take special time to thank Travis for all his help in running this committee and his help in the state committee as well. We have two other groups that have helped with the seating for the state committee, getting that done this year, and the turn committee help putting that together. Just invaluable to so I certainly appreciate that.
Okay, I'm seeing maybe some comments. Were you able to hear John there very well, or was that kind of quiet? It was kind of quiet. Okay, so we'll work on that as we move forward. Really, John was just thanking me on some things, and so you don't really need to hear that. That's okay. Thanks for the smiles and the laughs out there. But we'll make sure that we switch microphones when John is going to speak. Okay, at this point, do want to turn over our committee to Rossi Trujillo to give our wrestling officials update for the year.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rossi Trujillo. I'm the president of the Colorado Wrestling Officials Association. I just wanted to bring to light a couple things that we thought were a successful change to this past year's state tournament. We had a new CHSAA liaison, Ben Kiefer, running the crew throughout the weekend. He brought in 2 external evaluators from outside of Colorado to help do some evaluations on the crew itself. With that change, we had 17 of the 33 officials call final matches on the whistle. So that's been a change based off of performance during that weekend. We thought it was a success. We are very happy. The other thing that I want to bring to light is we've only had 2 official complaints based off of some of the results at the state championships. Those have been resolved. Also on the line, we have Rob Ververs, who is our rules interpreter, should we have any questions going forward. But that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rossi. Just on behalf of myself and John and the committee, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to you and your officials crew. They did tremendous work throughout the season. And again, at the state tournament, their professionalism and their hard work is duly noted. They do a fantastic job at our state tournament. We are fortunate to have the quality of officials that we have in the state of Colorado. And I just would like to commend you and your officials for the excellent work that they have done. Every year I go to our state tournament and I am just amazed at the caliber of officiating that we have. So please extend our most heartfelt thank yous to all the officials, and we look forward to working with them again here next year. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to John to give us a few, or excuse me. I think at this point we were going to try and sneak Ernie in. We're going to recognize Ernie Durera to speak on a couple of proposals that he has submitted. Ernie, I know we're a little tight on time, but hopefully that gives you enough time to speak to those. For the committee, we're looking at seating criteria proposal number 1. And then Ernie will also touch base on his out-of-state points proposal, intentional forfeits, and then his state dual tournament proposal. So a lot to go over. We'll take some good notes, Ernie, but we'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to go out of order here. I have to teach here in about 10 minutes, so I'll make it as quick as I can. The first one, the easiest one that I think I'll cover first is the one around out-of-state transfers. Currently, Colorado High School Activities Association, the wrestling committee, doesn't accept out-of-state placers or state champions for seating at regionals or at state. And I just think that it's time that we start doing that. So I'm asking the committee to change policy to allow any out-of-state transfers who happen to be state placers or state champions in their previous state to allow that to count towards seating in Colorado. So questions on that? Okay, the next one that I'll cover is the seating criteria. Speaking to a lot of coaches, whether it be at my league, at regionals, at state, seating was the hot topic, obviously. And I just want to touch base on what my thoughts are on it. This year what we did was at the state tournament, regional champions, I think, were the top 4 seeds, and then they could move based off head-to-head, and then everything else was done based off winning percentage. One of the reasons why I don't think that works, I'll use one of my own wrestlers as an example. My 190-pounder wrestled the university kid, same university kid, 4 different times, pinned him 3 times, won by either a decision or major decision in the 4th. And including at regionals, saw him twice at regionals. Yet my kid was the 16th seed at state. And so winning percentage, when you look at that, it just comes down to how you schedule, quite frankly. Whether you have a tough schedule or you don't have a tough schedule is going to affect where you are at state based on winning percentage. And again, I don't think that's the what we're looking for. Quite frankly, when you look at the history of what we were doing prior to, I think it was 1991, 1992, the state of Colorado had 8 districts for wrestling, and the top 2 moved on to state. And at that time, if you were a district champion, you were seeing a district runner-up at the state tournament. I think it was 1991. I could be off a little bit there on the numbers. We went from 8 districts to 4 regions. And instead of taking the top 2, we took the top 4. And we went to the system that we were using for a long time. Okay, that happened to change this past year. And in my opinion, that system worked. You're never going to have a great, perfect seating system. It just won't happen. It just doesn't work. Okay, but as Travis mentioned earlier, the wrestling committee made some very intentional decisions over the last several years. About a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, we moved to the serpentine system for 5A, and then little by little that went to all of the classifications, and that was an effort to separate the top teams. Doesn't do anything to address the weight classes, because you can't send obviously individuals to different weight classes from the rest of their team. Okay, so I think based off what we were doing before, combined with the fact that we separate the top teams, that pretty much gave us the best chance of getting those top kids to meet in the semifinals and the finals. I took some time looking at the 4 years prior to the COVID year. And when you look at the champions and runners up from regionals, nearly 90%, I think it was 87% of the top 8 in a bracket. So those who placed and those who were one away, that lost in the blood round. were made up of champions and regional champions. Runners up. So, you know, the numbers kind of support the fact that when you separate regions, you get the right wrestlers to the right matches. Okay, the few places where that didn't happen was where there might have been somebody who was third who came back and placed, and then a small handful of times where somebody who was a regional fourth placer who placed as well at state. Okay, so my proposal, number one, I think in that whole thing was to go back to what we were doing before with a couple caveats. You know, there were two things that I heard frequently that were commented on as far as the reason why that system didn't work. One, if you were a freshman regional champion, you didn't really have any state points, so you couldn't earn a top seed. You know, and another thing was that somebody, you know, there was comments that there were certain coaches that were trying to game the system and intentionally forfeiting. I tried to address that in a separate proposal. Okay, but the freshman piece, in my mind, you know, I was talking to JJ Barons about it from Greeley West. You know, we were talking about how you can assign state points to the weight class for that region. For example, 138 pounds, 3A region at Lincoln this year. You had a kid who was third and sixth. So that would have been what, 7 points, and maybe not 7, for 5 points there, and then somebody else who was fifth. So a total of 7 points on offer for that particular weight class at that particular region. The regional champion was a freshman from Mullen. He beat both those boys. Okay, so those 7 points that were on offer for that region at that weight class could go to that particular regional champion. So whatever your total is for that region at that weight class, those points go to the regional champion, and then you can seed your regional champion based off of those points. Once they're seeded, you can do the head-to-head, so that if 4 beat 3, they can switch. And then once you have all the head-to-head figured out for the regional champions, excuse me, then go back and separate 2, 3, and 4 for those regions, much like we did in the past. So every regional quarter bracket would have 4 different regions. You'd have the first wrestling the fourth. You'd have the second wrestling from the third, all from different regions, and then you can go from there. Okay. So that's what I'm proposing for the seating. I think the other two, the state team championship and the intentional forfeits, kind of self-explanatory. I understand that the problem with the intentional forfeits is that how do you prove that it's intentionally forfeited? But you know, I think if you look at something where, hey, there wasn't an injury that happened earlier in the tournament and they wrestled through the semifinals, you should expect that kid to wrestle in the finals. Outside of that, you know, I've got to get moving here, but Travis, I should be done here before you guys are done. So I'll hop back on. So if there's any questions, you guys can answer those questions. I can answer those questions for you then. Okay, but outside of the seat, does anybody have questions on the seating criteria?
Ernie, I noticed in your seating points, you had state qualifiers from the previous year who did not place shall be awarded half a point. What was your thinking with that?
Well, one of the things that some of the coaches talked about is they just thought that, hey, if you qualified for state, that we should have some sort of if you will, acknowledgement of the fact that they qualified for state but didn't place. So that's all that was taking feedback that I heard from the coaches and, hey, here's something that you can do. So you can give them a half a point, I think is what I said, if they were a state qualifier but did not place, but only for that previous year.
Thank you.
Ernie, Coach Buck, I have a quick question before you get to class. Are you saying only freshmen could absorb those state points from somebody, or it could?
No, any regional champion would get all the points on offer for that weight class in that region.
This would just help freshmen who have no points, but you're saying a junior could absorb somebody's state points if they beat them in the regionals? To help the seeding. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Yep.
And Ernie, I just want to clarify, the only head-to-head consideration you have in your proposal is just for those top 4 regional finishers and not for the whole bracket. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions for Ernie before we let him go? And again, Ernie, if we see you jump back on and we're still on that topic, we'll make sure to touch base with you.
All right. Thank you all for giving me some time.
No, I just had a quick question on that half a point. I know sometimes in the smaller divisions, you get 4 kids in a bracket at the regional tournament and they automatically are going. I don't think we should give them a point for that, just in cases like that.
I'm quite all right with that being changed. Again, like I said, Coach, it was just taking feedback from other people. You know, personally, I'm okay doing what we did before, and if the only way you get points is if you place.
All right.
Anything else? Again, Travis, thank you for giving me the opportunity to go a little bit early. Like I said, I'll get back on once I'm done with this class.
Sounds good. Try not to send anybody to the office, Ernie.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
All right. At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to John to give us a few updates that have come through the office here in the past year.
Thank you, Travis. As many of you are aware, our classifications have been updated for this year. They can be found on CHSAA.com. There weren't a ton of changes in terms of schools moving from one classification to another, but those are all available. Those would not be for the next year. It would be for the 24-26 cycle. So that's something our office has done. There was a 2 things that had passed in the January Legislative Council. The first one was the approval of 12 tournament days starting next year. So we keep 10 dual days, but 12 tournament days for next year. The second approval was from the Classification Leagues and Organization Committee, or CLOT committee, that is instilling a second classification for girls wrestling starting the 24-26 cycle. So those 2 things have already been passed. Legislative Council will meet again in April, and they will approve or take a look at what our committee offers forward. So just wanted to update that. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, John. Again, to remind the committee that that approval of the 12 tournament days did get pushed through Legislative Council here in January. That was based on our recommendation from last year. So want to thank the Legislative Council for going ahead and supporting that bylaw change. Couple notes just to put down, regional and state dates for next year. Regionals will be February 9th and 10th. And our state date is February 15th through the 17th. And we will be working with Ball Arena to reserve Ball Arena and make sure we're all set there. But those are our dates for 23-24.
I had a quick question to Sandra George from Jetfield. For the girls classification, has that been approved then? Is that going forward for this coming up year?
Sandra. Yeah, there was a motion from the floor at Legislative Council in January to add a second classification of girls for the 24-26 cycle. So yes, starting in 2024, we will have a second class of girls. So for next year, 23-24, there will still just be one class of girls, but after that, we will have 2.
Okay. Are we able to vote back on that if we don't have if there's not an increase or a need for the classification?
That is a great question. I don't know that we've, again, all indications are that we're going to have well over, 110 schools offering girls wrestling at that point, based off of the survey form that came back this fall in terms of teams declaring their intent to do that. Really at this point, even with 80 something schools, we're nearing that point where we need 2 classifications. When you look at the number of schools that are in each boys classification, that could, range from 40 to 60, we're in that range. So I think we would be moving forward with 2 classes. Obviously, if there are some extenuating circumstances, that's something we would review at the time. There are 2 legislative council meetings next year that potentially we could maybe look at, but again, I think all indications are that we'll be moving forward with 2 classes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
John, did you want to jump in?
So I know, Sandra, there's a concern about overall numbers of girls, and I think one thing we can take a look at a committee for sure is does it still make sense to do 14 weight classes? Are there some modifications we can do? Would we still do 4 regions for 2 classifications? These are all things that once we get a little bit closer to the 24-25 school year, so next year at this time, we can take a look at and see what makes the most sense for that second classification to be successful.
Okay, I was just curious because some of the brackets at regionals weren't 16-man brackets. They were, barely 8. So that's why I ask.
Oh, good thoughts. Definitely things that we'll be looking for this year or next year, this time at our committee meeting, is if we need to do any format changes or look at how that's going to look for the cycle following. Okay, at this point, I'll move to Article 6 on our agenda, and really just this is just in here as a review of what our regional and state seating procedures are currently. I don't know how in depth the committee needs me to go through this. I think most of you are familiar with our current procedures. Wanted to have this in here because obviously our discussion items that follow are going to heavily be discussing our seating criteria, particularly for the state tournament. And so I just want to make sure that we had that in here for us to go through and see if there's any questions. Is there any questions on the seating from the committee that you would like us to go over before we move forward? Okay, not hearing any thoughts or any questions on the current seating proposals. We'll go ahead and start moving forward. John, are you good if we move into our discussion items? Okay, John's nodding his head. Yes, we're good to go. All right. So we do have several discussion items on our agenda today. As you can see, we have proposals that really range from seating, which is quite a few of those, to several other items. I think we will just go ahead and start working through these as they are listed on our agenda, even though we did kind of take some of them out of order. I would again remind our committee members that these are just proposals. If you would like to make a motion, you are welcome to do so. But unless there is a motion from a committee member and it gets a second, we will not act on any of these proposals. I'm just checking to see if David Nickel is on. I do see David on. Want to welcome David Nickel to the floor now. We're going to go ahead and look and listen to his wrestleback proposal. Again, committee members, that's linked in your agenda. That is proposal A. And I will turn the floor over to Mr. Nickel to talk about his proposal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all for all the work and efforts you do all year long, and I appreciate that very much. The reason I did this proposal, I've done this proposal 3 other years, and the reason why is because there's been some problems with the true bracket, the true fourth place bracket. And so the proposal that I did was to try to hopefully have you guys really ponder the possibility of actually following that the way it should be, and it would go forth really well in track wrestling. So what happens is when there has to be a fourth and fifth place wrestle back, what CHSAA has done over these years is taken that out of the real the actual thing going on for the tournament. And they've waited and given information basically based on what they, who they thought scored and all that kind of stuff. So they give out the awards, and then after it's all over, then they would do the wrestle back. Now, the biggest problem with this, and I put all this in the information that I had sent out, is, and when a wrestle back needs to be done, there is no true fourth wrestler put in the bracket system until it's done. Secondly, the actual format of the scoring that the team would get are not put in until that's done. Thirdly, the actual fourth place finisher will not be in that bracket until it's actually done. That's why this should be a part of the regular tournament format, the bracket. So those wrestlebacks should be done before you're done with the whole tournament and giving out awards before that happens. And the reason why this is an issue is for those that have, I've been running tournaments ever since 2013. And it became a problem for those running because they would give out brackets to the guys who had gotten first place, and it didn't even have who was the true fourth place person. And in track wrestling, once the bracket thing is done properly, that fourth place, true fourth place wrestler is in the system forever in history. Now, here was also a problem that happened when I was doing regional tournaments. I would have some coaches that were having an issue coming together because they said, well, my wrestler got fourth place. And then the other one says, well, no, mine actually got the true fourth place, but you got the bracket thing, you know, you got that thing before we did the wrestle back, and it became an issue. So what I'm just hoping is down the road, well, I hope you will consider the reality that this should be part of the tournament. That's why it's called a true fourth place bracket, to have those kids in. And there was a lot of kids too. I talked to coaches, I talked to people, I even talked to refs, and I talked to people running tournaments. What has happened is some of those kids, they get fourth place, but they've never really had the wrestle off. They get that fourth place ribbon or whatever, but then once they lose the actual wrestle back, they know they're not the true fourth. And a lot of them would even throw away that fourth place bracket, or not the bracket, but the ribbon. So I hope you guys were able to actually look at the format. I had 7 things on the proposal that I sent. It's just listing all the things that should happen to be, in my opinion, to be wise and to honor those kids and the coaches and the ones that are really running those tournaments. Any questions? Thank you very much.
I'll throw a quick comment out there. I'm Brian with Grand Valley High School. We had a kid that took 4th, lost his wrestle back. This proposal would avoid my entire a negative conversation that happened when their kid came and shook my hand and asked us to have our kid give him his 4th place medal back, which was pretty unsportsmanlike, but just a comment.
Yeah.
All right, committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Nickel?
I
No.
just, what's the negative side of doing it this way? I mean, I get what you're saying. Why are we doing it the way we're currently doing, I guess, and why wouldn't we change?
Well, what's interesting is the negative way that we've been doing these years has been a problem. The reason to do it forward in the proper way is better. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now, because I did this twice way back in time when we were first starting doing track wrestling. There was this one year that we're doing this, and there was a major storm coming in. And there was a guy who came up to me and said, is there any possible way we can go ahead and get this wrestle back, this 4th and 5th place wrestle back done before we're going into this finals round? Because we've got a 4 or 5 hour thing, and this crazy storm could be so here's what I did. And if I got in trouble, whatever, I talked to that guy and then I told all the coaches at that setting, I said, we're going to go ahead and do this the proper way and go ahead and do the wrestle back before we do the finals so that those guys can go ahead and mosey. And it was a safety thing, but to be honest, it worked better because the actual true fourth placer was true fourth. And when they gave out the brackets and they gave out the ribbons, it was the real true fourth wrestler. So I'm just saying, I've done this ever since in 2013. Harry Waterman was the guy that called me and said, hey, would you be willing to run a wrestling tournament on track wrestling for a regional state qualifying? And I said, absolutely. And we went through that process. And as we're going through, I was just hoping that over time, the committee would want to actually move forward with the proper and wiser way to honor these kids and honor the track wrestling situation. Track wrestling has a good format and it actually works moving forward as long as we follow the status of having that true fourth place bracket that we're doing.
And Tom, I can speak to some of the historical pieces here as to why it has not been included in the past. Part of this, Ernie mentioned in his talk earlier. Previously, we had 8 districts, and the top 2 came from each of those districts, and so there was no wrestleback format included at that time. Okay, when we moved to 4 regions and took the top 4. Then there came a suggestion that, when that 5th place wrestler has not wrestled that 4th place wrestler, is that a fair way to determine whether or not, who that qualifier should be for our state tournament? So really what there's been is kind of a philosophical difference between what Mr. Nichol sees and what the wrestling committee in the past has seen in terms of how we should qualify wrestlers for state. So in the past, the wrestling committee determined that in order to try and be equitable and, give wrestlers the opportunity to earn their way to state, instead of the way the bracket plays out, is to offer that wrestleback opportunity. It has not been included in the past because in a true fourth bracket, then you do award team points for that wrestleback opportunity. And that does change the, potential outcome of your regional championship and your regional placing. So in the past, the wrestling committee has felt like that wrestleback really is not part of the tournament itself, and that it is simply just an opportunity afforded to that 5th place athlete if they have not seen that 4th place wrestler. And so that's why that is in place, is simply just as a qualifying opportunity for those wrestlers if they had not met. Now, again, if the committee feels differently, that we want to start including that match as part of the tournament and award team placing and those kinds of things, we can look at that. And again, that's what this proposal is all about.
Yeah.
But that's historically, it was given as an opportunity for that 5th place wrestler to try and earn a qualifying spot to state, not to make it part of the actual tournament.
And there's one thing I want to add on to this. The reality, though, the actual bracket that we're using with track wrestling is true 4th place bracket. And if you don't have that as a part of the format before the tournament is over, you're not following that procedure. And I talked to track wrestling about this several times. I was curious what was going on in other states, and I was curious what is the best procedure. And when I talked to them individually, they said, this is a true 4th place bracket. So I'm just saying that one more time, because to do it forward in the proper way, to honor the kids, to honor the teams, is a good way. Now, an historical thought that it shouldn't be, I'm just going to tell you right now, that's an historical thought of a lot of guys that are thinking about in the past, and this is the way we should keep doing it. Hey, I'm an old guy too, and I've been around in this format for so many years, but it really would be good to honor the reality of who is the true 4th as part of the tournament. And actually, you don't have kids getting mad because they know they're not the true 4th kid, and they don't want to keep the action that they were delivered. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Again,
Travis, oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead,
Travis,
John.
so you said that this format was adopted back when there were 8 qualifying tournaments versus 2. So if that's the case, is that what I couldn't quite.
No, we did not have this back when there was 8
Okay,
districts.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought. 'Cause I didn't-
We did
okay,
not have this format there. It was only after we moved to
to the 4.
four
Okay, that's why,
regions.
because I was like, wait a second. So, okay. So then, yeah, I see some questions that are coming up, which makes sense. You know, the 45-minute rule does apply to some of it, obviously. But we've been running it this way. Is there a negative side to adding team points to it? I mean, if a kid takes true fourth, because it's a true fourth track wrestling tournament, then what is the issue of giving awarding that true fourth points and then the other guy fifth? I mean, is there a downside to that? Is that what people are worried about more? So, does that make sense?
Right. Again, I guess my question is, do we do a true second place format?
You don't do that now.
We don't currently.
And that's okay, because it's different. All those guys still go to state. But when you have a 4th place,
Yes, I understand
that's
that.
different, because they are going to state and they're the true 4th place wrestler.
But we don't offer that 3rd place wrestler that opportunity to go wrestle back for the 2nd place wrestler to earn those team points for his team.
Right, but you don't have to. But on this one, if you
And
really
we don't have to offer that 4th place wrestler or that 5th place wrestler the opportunity either. That's what we haven't been doing. So again, they're philosophical differences. And again,
yeah.
any questions from
what you just brought up? It is philosophical, but here's the difference. You can have philosophical thoughts and premiums about stuff because of the past, or you can actually think about what would be the best thing to honor the kids and the teams and to actually honor a true 4th place bracket. If you guys don't want to do it the proper way, then maybe you should talk to track wrestling and not even have a true 4th place bracket. Because if you're actually having that, but you're not using it as a part of the tournament, you're not following the procedure like it should be, which is what track wrestling told me when I talked and asked questions to them. But y'all get to decide, because I've proposed this. This is the 4th time I've done this, and a lot of people don't want it, but a lot of people do that have come and talked to me at tournaments, kids, coaches, and people that run the actual tournaments on track wrestling. But thank you very much for bringing this up. I really appreciate it, Travis.
Yep. Thank you, David. Committee members, any discussion, any questions that you have? Would any committee member care to make a motion to approve the proposal or to put the proposal forward? Hold on, sorry about that.
We have comment from Pat in the chat. Pat says, I think it's time to move the true 4th. If we want to move the true 2nd as well, I'm for that as well. It will help with state seating. Rob Ververs, it helps with unsportsmanlike penalties that occur during wrestlebacks, but cannot be truly penalized because the tournament is closed. Thank you.
This is Dave. You're one thing about something to think about anytime you want to have that challenge match between 3rd and 2nd is the difference in the match. The 1st and 2nd match is a pretty big deal. That kid comes off of it and has to challenge against a 3rd coming off of victory. It already happens with 4th and 5th. I'm just not sure it's the same. It's not the same comparison, I don't think.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts from the committee? And again, I would entertain a motion at this point if someone would like to do so.
Pat says he motions.
Okay. So we have a motion from Pat to move to a true fourth format. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay,
Who was that?
Tom, second that. Okay,
So Travis, real quick, so we would just have this would be part of the tournament, but again, I think the question seems to be, I'm looking at some of the comment as, what about the points? Somebody said, I just can't read it. Both wrestlers are awarded the team points as fifth. Does that change? Are we gonna, or is this just gonna be part of the tournament? I mean,
based on the proposal as I see it, that yes, that it would be, that match would become part of the tournament and the team points would be awarded appropriately based on who won that match.
So real quick, if we're agreeing with the fourth place wrestleback or the fourth place wrestle for fourth and fifth, are we moving the second for a true second, or?
That's not included in this.
Okay.
No, that was, again, that was something that I mentioned just as an example, that we don't do this in any other part of the bracket. And so that's been the philosophy in the past, is that we don't, it's not part of the bracket, so to speak, because that's not the bracket that we were operating. And that really the opportunity for the wrestleback was just a qualification purpose for state and not as, again, part of the actual bracket. So that really, the true set, or the true second piece was just an example that I used.
Could I just give one more little thought? Because that was a really good question. The goodness of just doing the true fourth place wrestleback as a part of the tournament is it works really fine. And I know that because I did it twice when there was terrible weather. And we were able to have that true fourth place wrestleback before the finals happened. Now, trying to do a second probably wouldn't be appropriate because the finals is such a big, giant thing. And then to have to do a thing after that, probably, at least at this point, wouldn't be good. But the fourth place thing would be fantastic because it would honor everybody that wants to really move forward in the proper way. And track wrestling, by the way, they told me until that fourth place, true fourth thing is done in the system in track wrestling, there will not be given the points to the team. Both teams would only get the fifth place points, not fourth. That's why I asked them the reality of what would be the best. And they told me every time I talked to them, they said it would be best to actually follow this in the proper way as a fourth place, true fourth place thing. So thank you.
And David is correct that you do not get those fourth place points awarded until it's done the way that track has it set up. So those that are tournament directors have to, they have to be aware of that and make sure that as they're looking at those team races, that they are aware that those points have not been awarded yet. So. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded to adopt the true fourth place proposal. At this point, we will go ahead and, is there any further discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none, and I don't see any from Pat in the chat. We will go ahead and vote. Since we're on this virtual format, again, if committee members can either just, as I call your name, you can say yes or give me a thumbs up. Either way works, or if you're in favor of it. If you're not in favor of the motion, then no sign is needed. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that?
Yes, sir.
Seeing some nods and things. Okay. Sean, Rocky Ford.
Yes.
Sandy, are you getting this? Yeah. Okay. Matt, Ray.
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, Cherokee Trail.
yes.
Sandra Chatfield.
Yes.
Rachel Mead,
Yes.
John is not on here. Pat, can you let us know, or I would just, yep, got a thumbs up from Pat. Rick, Fort Lufton. Yep, got a thumbs up from Rick. Tom, Eagle Valley,
Yes. Yes.
and then Jason, Prairie View.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
Could I just say one thankfulness? I want to thank all of you so much for your hearts, because this has been such an amazing thing to try to make forward. Thank you for all your work and effort that you're doing. And I really appreciate each and every one of you in a deep way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Okay, moving on to our seating proposals. We have 9 different proposals that have been put forth for state seating criteria. Again, I think we will try to operate as efficiently as possible. I know a lot of this is going to probably take some discussion on our part. And so I think probably the best way to go through is to allow each of the presenters to present their proposal. Committee members, feel free to make notes on each of those proposals. We will have those presenters stay on with us for our discussion. I think after each proposal, if there are specific questions about the proposal, we will handle those there. And then following all of the proposals, I know John has some data for us that we can look at, and then we can have one discussion after the proposals have been presented as to, you know, what kind of direction that we want to go, if we want to make changes and those kinds of things. Are there any questions before we get started with the presentations of the proposals? Okay, yep, all right, so we will move to proposal number 2. John, I don't have the names.
Dave and Brian.
Okay, Dave and Brian are going to present proposal number 2, and I will go ahead and turn the floor over to them.
All right, thank you. David and I talked. He's going to let me stumble on my words first. So first of all, thanks for the opportunity to talk to y'all. I hope you've read the proposals. I don't want to go back and reread it. I'm assuming everybody's read it and gone over it. Very similar to what Ernie spoke about already. So I just want to talk first about the pros of 1 against 4, 2 against 3. That's the basic premise. First and foremost, I believe in having, just reverting back to what we did before, because it promotes taking risks during the season. And kids, last year I had a kid coming into regionals. I mean, we used to get some really good seeds because of coming into regionals based on win-loss percentages and those things, but it didn't help us be competitive. And so I increased the competitiveness of our schedule. And I had a kid that had 3 losses going to regionals, and this year he had 10 losses going to regionals because we wanted better competition. And so obviously I'm not talking about seeding for regionals, it's seeding for state. And so we're trying to peak for that regional tournament going into the state tournament. So I feel like the 1, 4, 2, 3 helps peak for regionals. And then it helps the kid that maybe struggled throughout the season. If we've got, some kids are maybe newer to the sport, they struggle at first, just inexperienced, they're getting lots of mat time, they're losing some matches, gaining ground on the kids ahead of them. And then as they grow through the season, they have a peak performance at the end because of their hard work and efforts. Some of the proposals out there with the seeding doesn't reward that kid. It actually kind of punishes a kid for having a tough beginning of the season. I feel like personally, the way the seeding has been aligns better with life principles about taking risks, not being afraid to lose, those types of things. It also promotes all programs. Sometimes I feel like some of our seating, some of the conversations that are out there are more about focusing on getting the number 1 and number 2 kid in the state to the finals, which I get that. I mean, we all want to have it seated as best as we can. But really, I think we need to have a seating criteria that promotes everybody, every kid in every program, not just the best, not just the top kids. And it kind of, some of the way the seating, when we get into too much of the wins and win losses and head to head, that is really hard on Western Slope teams. I actually did some numbers. I mean, you look at 5A alone, there are 2 5A schools on the west side of the Continental Divide. And there are 50, what is it here? I got my numbers. Sorry. I was doing a bunch of research. There are 51 5A schools on the front, on the east side of the state, and 2 on the west. So if you're talking head to heads and any kind of, those types of seating criteria, they are in trouble. They have to travel over the mountain every single weekend to get their head to head and different things. And then the numbers aren't necessarily a whole lot better with the rest of them. The closest comparison is 2A, where you have 20 on the west slope and 47 on the east side of the state. And that doesn't factor in north and south and all the mountains in between, because going from Fort Collins to Pueblo is a different drive than going from Moffat County to Cortez. Completely different geography. And so some of the proposals would really hurt the Western Slope schools, like really hurt them. But the number one thing for me, the pro of keeping it similar to what we had, is it's cut and dry. And I get frustrated with sometimes the maneuvering and the finagling and the jockeying for position that coaches sometimes can do, dodging kids, bumping weights. I mean, I am a proponent of teaching kids life skills. I'm trying to coach my kids to the 40, 50, 60 years after wrestling, because wrestling will end. And for most of them, it'll end after they're 18 years old. I want to use this sport to teach them how to live a life of risk taking and getting after it. And it's not how you start, but how you finish in life. And so that's the biggest reason I'm partnering with Dave on this. It's really more of a philosophical thing. But again, I just think it's a simple, cut and dry, and it aligns with us as a school. We're supposed to be student athletes, not just athletes. Dave.
Okay, I'll go, Brian. You done? Thanks, everybody. First, Mr. Sullivan, sorry you had a rough last month or so, but I know it's all going to get better. One thing I wanted to tell everybody, I saw Mr. Sullivan take a mop to a mat, start to mop up puke before somebody stopped him from doing it. And that tells you what kind of commissioner we have. So that's awesome. And then also I saw Ververs is on this committee. I can't believe all the new faces we have all of a sudden this year refereeing. I'm glad you have that going. And I think that's fantastic. And hopefully we can keep it going. But it was fun to see a lot of new faces at the state tournament. And they did a great job. So good job. I wrote this proposal as well, just like Brian. We went together on it. I'm just going to hit on a couple things. I know how hard it is to be on the committee. I was on the committee before. Sometimes you have to make votes that don't necessarily help your own program out, but they help the sport as a whole. And that's what we have to make sure that we're doing. I did some research last year, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, even I believe Pennsylvania. And then I don't know about some of the other states, but those guys for sure use the 1-4-3-2 regional selection method. My friend in Kansas at Lawrence, he mentioned, I was like, well, what do you do when you end up with that situation where you have a really good number 2 hitting a really good number 1 in the quarterfinals? And he's like, well, we all kind of figure that the kid should have won his regional match. So it's kind of that wrestling toughness that happens in those life lessons like Vashis was talking about. So I think that we're not like out of the norm, sticking with what we've always had before. I'm just going to touch on a couple things. You can read the proposal that we wrote, like Brian said. It's basically just to go back to the way it was, 1, 4, 3, 2, just a random selection of which template you would start with, just to ensure that every single kid from every region gets a chance to wrestle somebody else in the state. This year, I'm going to mention just how it went with seeding. A returning state champ. Initially, there was a kind of a cop out. Some guys were saying, well, the initial proposal was that you'd have the original state champion would get to be our returning state placer would be the number 1 seed, and then after that, then you go head to head and all that stuff. Well, that doesn't work, and I'm going to point out one of my guys. So I'll throw one of my guys under the bus. My 126 pounder finished second at state last year. This year, he really didn't even probably belong. He ended up placing at state, but he wasn't there. And if we would have went with that old system, he would have been the number 1 seed, and then the number 2 and 3 would have been the kids that ended up being in the finals. And he didn't wrestle either one of them during the season. And it wasn't because we don't try to go places to see over the mountain to see different people. It's really just because it just doesn't happen all the time. Win percentage of most wins, Brian touched on that. It just eases, people will just start shooting for an easier schedule, and that's not going to work. And then I hear people say, well, what about head to head? Head to head is a great criteria. Well, it is, but I'm going to give you an example. Some of you guys know me. I was in brush for like 25 years. And when I was out there, I didn't give a rat's kahootie about the Western Slope. But now that I'm over here, we spent darn near $2,000 to go to the Florence tournament. That's only 2 hours away, but we had to drive over a pretty nasty mountain pass to get there. We had to miss school. And then on top of that, after we spent all that money and time, we didn't even get to see, we didn't see brush one time. And I was hoping we were going to beat the snot out of brush just to have some fun with them, and we didn't even get to see them. We saw Eaton once, we saw Mullen once, but guess what? We saw Alamosa, we saw Delta, we saw all the Western Slope teams that came over there. So I feel like the head-to-head doesn't work. Schools aren't as lucky as I am. I have a great AD that helps me try to travel as much as we can. But a lot of the schools over here don't. A lot of the smaller schools don't. And we can't be in a position where we're making it extra hard on the smaller schools that live on the fringes of the state to get guys qualified. Little schools like Antonito are trying to get a program started. And then, that's rough. It's hard to turn a program around or to start something and then to put them behind from the beginning. It's really hard, and it's not good for wrestling. Last thing I wanted to say, irregardless, if you want to go seeding or if you guys choose to go with the old system that we had again, neither one of the systems is going to prevent those matchups from happening. Everybody talks about you want the best 2 guys in the finals. Well, you know what? I could tell you stories about guys that I had that finished 5th at regionals that won 5 in a row and were a state champion. You don't know who the best are until the tournament starts. You try to start as good as you can from the beginning, but none of the systems are going to be perfect. And with that being said, you have to pick a system that's going to be the best for most kids. Last thing I'll say is we had a kid on our team this year that in the first round of the tournament, he wrestled our number 4 seed. In the second round of the tournament, he wrestled his regional championship. In the third round of the state tournament, he wrestled his regional quarterfinal. And then in the finals, he finally got to wrestle a kid from another part of the state. And that's just not right. That's not scholastic. And kids need to walk up there and look and see what their kid they're going to go against, see what color singlet they have, and maybe even look at a map and see where they're from, because they probably haven't even heard of it before. So with that being said, thanks for your time. And I appreciate everybody's input, and thanks for helping try to move stuff forward in a positive direction.
All right, any questions for Dave or Brian? Gentlemen, thank you for taking time to put the proposal forward. Thank you for your time today. All very valid points, and we appreciate hearing what you have to say. Okay, moving on to, and again, Dave, Brian, if you can stay on in case we have further questions or things, we would enjoy, having that opportunity. Okay, next, Eric from John Mall will present his proposal.
Hey everyone, I'm Eric Vilpondo. I'm the head coach at John Mall. So my proposal is similar to our regional seating. Since the state tournament is just a continuation of our regional tournament. My proposal, I put that we seed the top 8, build the bracket, and then draw the rest of the remaining wrestlers in. The reason I looked at it this way, because I kind of broke down all the stats and looked at everything on how this year's seeding went. And the majority of the time, the top 8 kids were those top 8 seeds. They came out on top. Whether they were placing top 6 or just that one round out. It was like 84%, 87% in the different classifications. So where I think that the true seed kind of worked. Now the new system has its flaws, and I've heard coaches talk about how it weighs the regional champs too heavy. Where someone might be a regional champion, they don't have any previous history of placement and stuff, so they were still stuck in front of people. So in my proposal, it would go true seed based on all the current previous placement points that they have. But the way I looked at it too is that they wanted to give weight to regional champs because they wanted that match to happen. They didn't want people just to make the finals and forfeit knowing that they're going to get a seed in the bracket no matter where. So in my proposal, I put that a regional champ gets 1 placement point. Does it have to be 1 placement point? No, it could be half a point if you don't think it values as much as a 6th place finish. Now, the other benefit to this, I know a lot of coaches were complaining about that first round regional matchup where they've already wrestled the kid. But when you're seeding the top 8, the bottom 8 can really go anywhere you want. So if you get stuck with that regional matchup, you can simply move it somewhere else because they're getting drawn in anyway. Make sure I got anything else that's in there. But I think it's simple. It's exactly what we do for regionals. And it's kind of the same way that we approach every tournament. I know that win percentages can always be skewed one way or another, but every tournament we do throughout the year, that's what we honor for seeding and previous placement points. We do it for regionals. It's just following the same format. It's a continuation of the regional tournament. I have more numbers if you're curious, but I mean, when I looked at a lot of the first round matches, I mean, the vast majority, close to 90% of the time, 95% of the time, higher seed won. It kind of went the way it should have went in terms of what those people have earned in seeding. I mean, I know the old system had its flaws too. You'd look at, we'd have one region that's completely stacked with maybe the number 1, 3, 5, 6 kid, and then you have another region where there's absolutely not quite the same quality, and that whole region might get put out, and those other kids have to kind of get put in a bracket in a place that's not where they truly should be with what they've earned in the past. So it's pretty simple. Again, it's just based on what they've done. Seed them out that way. Look at your percentages head to head. Build the bracket with top 8 seeded and just draw on the rest. And if there's any regional matchups that are just right there, you can swap them out. It would make things fast. You don't have to try awarding points to everybody who's been a qualifier, this, that. It should be pretty quick to build these brackets like that. Would it mean that there could be some potential regional matchups in the quarters? Yeah, it absolutely could. I don't think you can avoid that with this system. But if that's where those kids have earned their place, then I feel like that's the most equitable place to be. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to John. He's got a question for you.
Eric, can you quickly just go over how you seed those top 8? I understand you'd give
Okay, yeah. So
some sort of criteria point.
yeah, it'd be the
to
criteria that we
regional
use
champ,
in
but
terms of
would those top 8 be following the exact regional seeding criteria we already use?
yeah. placement points, and then your win percentage. And then at the very end, after you have all 16 placed, you run your head to head. And once you have your top 8 established, you just build the bracket, draw the rest in, and make any of those changes in that first round if it's a regional matchup, since that was a big concern for a lot of coaches, that first round match.
Thank you.
And then I guess one other thing I'd like to just kind of, with the old system, I know no one was proposing to add a true second, but if we're going to have specific places where wrestlers go based on how they finished, well, then maybe true second should be factored in if we go back to the old system. Yeah, they'd still be on the same half bracket, but that changes the quarters up, and you win the quarters, you're a placer. So if the old system goes back, then maybe a true second should be looked at also.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Again, I think what we're going to hear is a common theme throughout all of our presentations is that there are pros and there are cons of each system. Eric brought up some good points there. And some of the data that he has here is data that we're going to share after the proposal. So again, another way to look at things. And Eric, thank you for your time and for putting this proposal forward.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Okay, for our next proposal, number 4, do not see JC Watt on our call currently. So on his behalf, I can just touch base real quick. It's a quick hitter. Really, he just put a proposal forward to return to the previous seating model that we had used prior to this year. And you can see pros and cons that he has listed there. Any question on JC's proposal? Okay. All right. Next, we have JJ from Greeley West to present the next proposal.
All right, hey, thanks, guys. I think Ernie kind of explained part of it already. But Wild State Tournament, I spent some time, picking Penfold's brain and stuff like that. And we both felt the value in the regional way it was kind of done in the past. But like you said, yeah, it didn't do a freshman or a wrestler that showed tremendous growth from the year before. It didn't give them any justice when it looked at seeding them. And again, there's no perfect bracket. I mean, I'll say even the way we do our regional seeding. In other sports, you can do an RPI, strength of schedule, and you can in wrestling. It's just too difficult. And then I think this year showed in some of the matches we had in the quarters and the semis. But I mean, I'll be honest, as a wrestling coach, right? There's certain matchups at our regional tournament where teams that have an easier schedule. I love being a 6 seed going against that other team who's the 3 seed has a better record. So like I said, I know there's pluses and minuses in both, but this one kind of goes back to the old way with the point system. 6 points for a champ, all the way down to 0.5 for a qualifier. It's a total of total regional points. So like I said, if that freshman beats a state runner-up, and let's say the other kid was a 5th, well then that's 7 points for that region. And stuff. And then go ahead and do that for every weight, or for every each weight, each place. So even the second place guys, we're going to line those guys up based off their points from the previous year. We'll use a head-to-head criteria with them also, and seed those out too, right? And then do that with the 3rd place and the 4th place, with the only caveat being is that we do not want kids to meet up first round from the same region. I think as wrestling coaches, as change goes around, we have to accept that, we can't wait till those matches to happen in the semifinals. And so if you saw my proposal, like one of them, I had where 2 regional kids were going to meet up. It was like a 1 and a 4. And basically what we do is we make that judgmental decision. That 1 and 4 that we're going to meet up, the number 4 was the lowest seed out of the number 4s, and we just flipped him with the spot ahead of him. And so it was still 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3s throughout the bracket. But you know, I got an example bracket there if you guys see the proposal. So any questions? I mean, I know this one takes a little bit more time. I think this is probably the biggest negative is having a group of individuals together to get this done. But track wrestling can compile a decent amount of this stuff to make it go easier.
We hope.
Yeah.
That was our hope this year too. And I'm glad JJ said it because I was thinking it like, and I don't want this to be, and I'm glad this kind of came up now, but procedurally wise, I want the committee to know we can get done whatever we need to get done. Okay, and I know JJ's proposal, this would be more intensive on the seating day, but I don't want that to be something that sways our decision one way or another. I have faith in John that between him and I and the group that seeds, we can come up with an effective way to have the seating occur after the regional tournaments. Again, in my head, I hear JJ's proposal. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. And I'm sure others do as well, but we can figure out a way to do that if that's the way we want to go. Again, through all of these proposals, through all of our discussions, please keep in the forefront of your mind that, you know, we want to try and do what we believe is best for wrestlers in the state of Colorado. Okay, regardless of how much work it may take, we want to make sure we do things that we feel are in the best interest of the state. JJ, I do have one question. Just, you know, if we're avoiding those regional matchups, I worry about potential heartache from us having to make a call in the seating meeting that, okay, there was a regional matchup here, and now we're just gonna swap these kids. Do you have any additional criteria that we could think about in terms of making those swaps? Because I just feel like that is one thing that potentially could put the seating committee in a precarious position if they're having to make those we're just going to swap 3 and 4, or we're going to swap these 2 here just to avoid the regional matchup. Just in my work with other seating committees and things over the years, that's just one area where if we had something that was a little bit, you know, that we could use to make that determination, that would be helpful. And again, to clarify, yours does not have head-to-head is not a part of yours throughout the 16-person bracket, correct?
It is amongst the places. So like if you look at my my regional runner-ups, you can see it says region 4 had a head-to-head over region 2. So we make those changes there. Mm-hmm. And then to answer your question about, you know, how do you make that flip? I think you always flip with the lowest seed. You never want to obviously hurt a kid that has a higher. So if it was a 3 seed that's meeting up that needs to be moved, you would flip him with the number 4 for that place.
And if it's a 2 seed, then you flip the 2 and the 3.
Yeah.
If it's the 1, then it's the 1 and the 2.
I mean, the reality of it is they're still wrestling a number. If it's a 2, he's still wrestling a number 3 from another region. So.
Okay. And so again, just to make sure that the committee knows, so a 5th place person, if they have wrestled that 4th place seed, that 5th place seed head to head and 5th has beat 4th, we're not making that shift though. It's just within the regional champs, the regional 2nds, the regional 3rds, and the regional 4ths that we're doing the head to head. Okay. Oh, okay. All right, I just got informed. Sorry, before we move on, any other questions for JJ? Okay. Again, thank you for taking the time to put that forward and for speaking on behalf of it. And we will take that under consideration.
All right, thank you.
Sounds like JC is on now. So we'll go ahead and give JC an opportunity to speak as well on this proposal. Oh, JC, I think you're muted. It happens to all of us. It doesn't
There we
matter
go.
how many
Sorry.
times we've done one of
Now
these.
can you hear me?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you're good.
No, I listened in when you talked about my proposal, and it's really quite simple. Just go back to the other one. Dave and Brian's proposal is strikingly similar. I think the previous system, really the only thing that I didn't know is where you put the 2s and 3s in the quarter bracket. And I think one suggestion I didn't put in my proposal was that I don't know if you continue, I don't know if it was random how the 2s and 3s went in the quarter brackets, but as coaches, we didn't know. And I don't know if maybe it's better we don't know where the 2s and 3s go. You know what half bracket you'll be on, you just don't know what quarter bracket you'll be on. And I don't know whether it would be better that if we knew what system each bracket was going to be, where we would manipulate that, or on whether you get second or third at regionals. I think we had some manipulation this year in some regional finals that weren't wrestled. And I think that was kind of bad for the sport that happened. And even if the old system, there might be some manipulation. I know in the past people have talked about it. But the one thing I didn't like about this year is if we went forward with the same system, is that coaches would change their schedules and try to maybe get, some more dual meets with teams that they could get some more wins with, or something along that line. So your winning percentage or wins is up, which helps you in your regional seeding or state seeding. So I thought of all the ones I've seen so far, and of all the ones that were proposed, going back to the old system, similar to the ones we've with, especially Brian and Dave's, I thought that is better than using any other system that has been proposed.
Okay. Any questions for JC? All right, JC, thank you for jumping on. Appreciate that very much. I do believe that, again, some of the points that JC brings up here about potential manipulation of the system and those kinds of things, committee, those are things that I think we do need to keep in the back of our mind. I'm going to get on my soapbox just a tiny bit here. I will not stay there for long. But I want to echo part of what Brian and Dave were talking about earlier, in the fact that we are here for kids, and we are here for the sport of wrestling, and we're here to put, an honorable product forward. And I would encourage any of those coaches that are listening that maybe do not take honor as their highest priority to think about that a little bit, and what we are teaching our kids and the lessons that we are teaching our kids. So I'll stop there, but thanks for giving me that opportunity, JC, to get on my soapbox.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay. Is he on? Trying to see. Coach Yapujin from Byers, are you on our call? Don't think I see you there. Okay. All right, let me see if I can. Okay, John's going to go ahead and, I found it here. Here, I've got it. So we don't have to do the microphone thing. Okay. Again, committee, you have Coach Yapujin's proposal there. It's to seed all 16 wrestlers using the current criteria for seeding. Regionals would be used to determine the 4 qualifiers, nothing more. This is the only effective way, unless regionals are I can't read that word, but
moved around.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Moved around. Otherwise, go back to the way it was before. Okay. Any questions there? Okay. Looks like it's,
McLaughlin or Jeremy Gilkerson.
all right, representative from Pueblo East or Canyon City would like to go next. I'm not trying to see if I see them on here. John, I don't know that I see anyone on here for them. Okay, so for the committee, this is proposal number 7. So seating in all classes, wrestlers will be seated under the bracket using a criteria based on points for previous state placing. Once points have been determined, the criteria will be as follows: cumulative state points, overall win percentage this season, head-to-head this season, coin flip. Is that not the right one? Oh, did I get off? My apologies. Oh, yeah, looks like I don't have this one in here. Okay, so backing up. So in this proposal, there's too much value given to regional champions. It's impossible to balance each region with equal talent for each weight class. We need to treat regionals as a qualifying tournament. Once wrestlers have qualified, all 16 wrestlers are seated for the state tournament. Criteria in this proposal is state place from previous seasons, regional place points from the current and previous seasons, win percentage, head-to-head, then most falls, tech falls, major decisions. Rationale. Each year we have weights that have top wrestlers on the same side of the bracket. If we want to do what's right for our kids, we will take time and effort to seed the biggest tournament our kids compete in. Okay. That's the highlights of proposal 7. Any questions there? Okay. All right. Next up, we have proposal number 8. And the Honorable Ty Tatum will present to us on this one. And from here forward, he will be known as the judge. Okay.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. I was happy that I was at the end. I'm the kid that says ditto to everything now.
Okay, that's good. We'll need you here later saying ditto in a few minutes.
All right. So proposal 8 basically is go back to the seating method that we use for 30 plus years. Seating is fickle and it's not always going to work out, but if we were using something for 30 years that's used by other states like Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, and Arizona, it's pretty good. Are there changes that we can make within that seating system? Yes. And I think what JJ brought up and Ernie brought up are fantastic. I want to ask a question really quick. If you have ever coached or coached currently, have you ever looked at your kid and said, hey, it doesn't matter where you're seated, just wrestle? And so I think we've all done that. And I worked with a very smart coach a long time ago, and he told me that a seating meeting was basically a bunch of old guys sitting in a room trying to figure out who was going to win a tournament, when the reality is the kids are going to go out and wrestle and figure it out. And so we keep trying to make something fair in a sport that's not always fair. And again, I'll go back to what we've used for 30 previous years. One of the things that I like about, the previous seating system, as far as the 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, is it worked across all classifications. It worked across the entire state. It gave you the opportunity to schedule and go to different parts of the state. And I feel like if someone mentioned it before, if we went to the seating criteria that we use this year, now all of a sudden who I wrestle becomes a lot more important. So why am I going to go to Gunnison and wrestle in their tournament when I need to stay on the front range and wrestle more of those teams. Why am I going to let another team into my tournament when maybe they're not very good or they don't have the quality of kids that I need to see? And so I think things start to change and get manipulated there. Really, I see the old seating criteria as what's best for all. And I think that's important. I think that's been brought up. Like I said previously, I get to say ditto.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Ty? All right. Ty, thank you for those points. For those new on the committee, Ty brings up definitely a valuable point between our programs that maybe don't have as many kids, or maybe newer programs or struggling programs that at times they can be passed over by other schools at times. And so that's a good point to have in the back of our minds as we're trying to think about all programs. Is that how are we making a system that's best for everybody? And again, not speaking one way or another to a specific thing, but just saying, yeah, that is something we do see in wrestling, is that sometimes those different programs are, they're passed over. Okay, we do have one final proposal. I believe Jeff is presenting this proposal, and so I will turn the floor over to him.
Awesome, thank you. So, yeah, everybody's kind of saying the same thing. I don't think there's going to be a perfect seating system, but I think the bottom line, what we need to be looking at, and kind of what this proposal does, is that we seed every tournament that we go to throughout the year. I think every tournament is seeded, and the biggest tournament of the year, we don't necessarily do that. As far as the maybe given the priority to the kids that have earned the priority, the state points, previous, whatever. So if you look at a couple of the things that, this outlines, top priority would be points, from returning, previous state points. So you're going to reward kids that have done well in the past, whatever. And then your regional points. Sometimes we put a lot of emphasis on regionals, which is a big deal. But, you do have, unfortunately, the way the system is for regionals, we know as well, different regions are stronger than others. So that sometimes that regional champ can be placed at a part of the bracket where there could be somebody else in a tougher region that took second. And so it kind of outlines that a little bit. But, having the regional champs, and I'm just reading from the proposal, noted in the way that we did this year did not work because it positioned kids in very weak regions on the bracket in a place that elevated them above others with higher state points. So, or a stronger record even, et cetera. And so it kind of goes through, if you look at some of the benefits, creates a seeding system that we support nearly every other tournament during the course of a year. It recognizes regional placement without skewing finishes of the top kids in the state. So you're still recognizing the regional guys, but you're not taking away from somebody who maybe was in a tougher region that took second and they had state points. I know that talking with some guys, that 32 times in this last year in our state tournament, that the top kids probably, wrestled prior to the state finals. And I also know that there were 48 regional champs. This is from all divisions, 48 regional champs that didn't even place at state. And again, kind of, what Ty said, yeah, we do tell our kids, hey, just go wrestle. It's just, don't care about the seeding. But I think the goal is to somehow, we want to separate our best kids. Now, there's always going to be a situation where a kid comes out of nowhere and wrestles their best tournament. They were fourth place in region or something like that, and they find themselves in the state finals. All right. I lived that last year. So that was a couple, that was fun. But, I think the bottom line is that, we want to make sure we reward our kids, try to do our best to separate them. There are some negatives to this. Teams might change their schedule to try to, you know, so they don't meet up with those tough kids all the time. Unfortunately, it could, you know, punish some of the teams that do travel to tougher tournaments outside of, you know, Colorado or even the tough tournaments in Colorado. You know, you want to have a higher, you know, the best possible, you know, record you can in some of it. But I think most everything's outlined there. I don't know if there's questions or not. So.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
If we go to this type of seating, how do we, as a state, prevent the maneuvering, the jockeying, the changing of schedules, the stuff that, you know, Terry was even saying, we hope that we're not we don't do these things. We hope we're being honorable. I don't know that there's a way to, I mean, how do you manage that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're asking me or anybody else, but you know, we've talked about this, and I've had conversations with some of the coaches, and I think, you know, maybe even maybe it's one of the things that all regionals have to start, and they have to be 2 days, and they have to start at the same time. They have, you know, we need to try to be, you know, that way people aren't looking to see, oh, this region ended early. I know, you know, maybe there's things like that, but I'm not sure that I have an answer if it's addressed to me. So,
you know, I think that no matter what system we go with, teams are going to build their schedule how they think it's going to be best. We see it in all the other sports as well. When we switch to the new seating index or the RPI or those kinds of formulas, it's changed how scheduling occurs. Again, I think that's how you build your schedule. That's a choice that a school gets to make. And we just hope that, again, that it doesn't unintentionally hurt other schools that are trying to compete as well. Other questions for Jeff? Okay.
Hey, Travis.
Eric, go ahead, and then we'll go to JC.
I mean, I know the record padding, all that stuff is a concern, but even if they got to that point at regionals where they still qualified. So, I mean, they're still a quality wrestler. It's not that they cheated their way into the state tournament. So that's just something to look at. Like, they still won matches at regional. They still got that qualification. Their record, maybe they wrestled some people who weren't that helped build that record, but like they still beat kids at regionals. They're still a top 16 kid.
JC?
Yeah, one of the things if we true seed the tournament, I don't know this year. I wasn't able to go look at every kid and make sure that their records were correct. Maybe that's something that's done at the regional level, but I'm pretty sure there were probably kids that their records were not correct. I don't think that's something that the coach did intentionally, but it's pretty hard to navigate track sometimes when you have varsity record, JV record, and if a guy wanted to manipulate it, I'm sure you could and not get caught. But even I think unintentionally, track is sometimes hard to navigate, and I'm sure there were kids this year that got seated in positions where they shouldn't be because their record was just not correct.
You are correct. Without saying much more, you are correct. Other thoughts, questions? We do have a representative on to talk about proposal number 7. Jeremy's on, so we'll go ahead and move to Jeremy and have him give us an update on his proposal.
Let's see. You know, guys, after I sent mine in, I had a chance to talk quite a bit with Dave Urick, which he's on here. And I came in with it. I spoke with Pat Laughlin over at East. And at that point in time, we both agreed heavily that the tournament should be seeded 1 through 16. Talking with Dave quite a bit too, and kind of leaning back to our old system where we separated out our regional champs and and all that stuff like we used to do, but as Dave says, back in the day, I kind of started leaning away from seeding the tournament 1 through 16. But I will be honest, I don't have a great answer right now. It seems like as Dave and I were talking through stuff, every scenario, there's a situation where we can throw out a proposal that coaches can either manipulate their schedules, the system. There's options in every scenario. So what is best for the kids at this point? I don't know. I even threw up to Dave options about a whole random, sorry, I got kids coming in the weight room. But we talked about adding a combination of rankings. We talked about win percentages. We talked about all those things. And I feel like if we really wanted to do something, we'd have to combine and create a system that doesn't currently exist. And, you know, we talked about talking with Tim Yon's rankings. People are like, yes, let's do that. Then many people like, I disagree with that 100%. So I'm kind of all over the place right now. And my original proposal, I don't know that I completely agree with that either. So I don't have an answer for everybody. I know that we want to do what's best for kids. I know this year was not ideal. You know, my 50-pounder was the second best kid in the state. And we met up with our the regional champ in the semis like we did at regionals, and we got bumped into third. So what happened this year was not best for the kids. But do I have a great answer for you guys? I don't. And like I said, my original proposal, I don't know if I'm 100% on board with that.
Okay. Jeremy, thank you for jumping on and speaking with us and taking the time and know you're wearing multiple hats right now. And so thank you for being here. You know, I think, again, part of what Jeremy says there, you know, it hit me that really, I want to make it clear that regardless of what direction we go or whatever we decide to do here, that the kids will benefit from being able to participate in that tournament. What they do on the mat, it does count. And so once that seating's done, you know, it is up to the kids. I don't think that one philosophy over another does a disservice to kids. It really is just a different way of looking at doing the same thing. I know there are varying views on that, and those may disagree with me on that, but really there are two philosophies here, and that's what we're trying to work through. I don't think that choosing one over another does a disservice to kids. And again, Jeremy pointed out that regardless of which system we go with, there's potential for coaches to quote unquote manipulate it and you know, to have some gamesmanship there if they choose to do so. But again, when I'm on my soapbox, I'll tell you, we want to try and do and make those right decisions, those honorable decisions when those opportunities arise. Okay, at this point, we have gone through all of our proposals for potential seating changes. Okay. I do think at this point, I would just talk with the committee just a little bit about what your options are and where we're at currently and what, you know, where this discussion can go and what we can do from that. Again, if the committee chooses not to put forward any recommendations, then the current seating system would remain in place.
Can I go through steps and stuff?
Yep. And in a second, when we get into our discussion, I'm going to allow John to give us some data here. Okay. So if we choose to do nothing, then the current system stays in place. We can discuss and we can choose to adopt one of these proposals verbatim, kind of like we did with the true fourth proposal. So if someone would prefer to make a motion and we go with a certain proposal, we can do that. Again, it needs a second and we would have to, we would have discussion and make a motion on that. We can also choose to put forward our own recommendation A committee member can make their own proposal outside of the proposals that have been presented here. So we really have those things at our disposal. Again, anything like that would have to be seconded and then again voted upon. So we do have leverage to do what the committee would like to do. At this time, I am going to turn it over to John. He has some data he would like to present us that he's collected and some feedback that he's gotten from coaches from his survey that he put out. And then we could have some discussion and see what direction we want to head.
Okay, thank you, Travis. With Ryan Casey being back in the office, I had him compile some data from this year's tournament and last year's tournament just as a means of comparison. So if we start with this year's tournament, he compiled data to look at semifinal predictions. If we look at all classes together, the seeding was able to predict 71.1% of all semifinalists. The seeding this year in terms of straight up match prediction, so higher seed beating the lower seed, predicted 74.48% of all the matches. And in terms of predicted placers, number one or number two winning the bracket 80% of the time was correct. Number one making the final 84.29% of the time. Top four seeds placing 82.5% of the time. So if we compare that to the 2022 model, and we look at semifinal predictions, that model predicted 73.48% of the semifinalists, so 2% better. Match prediction 72.03, that it predicted the correct matches based on where they were seated. So that was a little bit worse than this year. And lastly, in predicted placers, number one or number two winning the bracket, 87% of the time was correct. Number one making the final, 78.6% correct. And top four seeds placing 84.1%. Okay, so that's this year and last year's compare. Next, I'd like to take some time to go over the feedback that I received from wrestling coaches. So we sent this out to athletic directors that were able to forward it to coaches and directly to coaches. We received 128 responses. In all honesty, I was a little disappointed in that. There's over 300 schools that received this, so we had a little over a third responding back, and I think it's important enough where when we ask for voice that everybody does in fact give their voice. So first question on the wrestling survey said, which seating model do you prefer? 61.7% preferred separating regions, 38.3% preferred seating 1 through 16 based on some sort of criteria. We then asked specifically about seating criteria. The most popular seating criteria was 60% of the votes, correlates with the first question that I just responded to, was to separate regions. 52% of the people responding to the survey did put value as number one as important value in state place points, and 17% chose regional points as a huge value. Lowest two were the number of wins and win percentage, which we've talked about today as well. We then asked people to respond to the proposals that they felt most comfortable with. As you heard today, there were quite a few proposals that kind of echoed each other. The proposal that received the most support with 30.6% of the number one choice was proposal 2, which was from Dave and Brian in terms of returning to the old model. There are obviously other ones that also said returning to the same model as well. So let me just go through these real quick so everyone kind of know where things fell. Holy Family and Ernie Dureras. Number one choice was 21%, as I just mentioned. Grand Valley and Gunnison, 30.6%. John Mall, 9.7%. Meeker, 12.1%. The rest, numbers 5 through 8 received less than 9.7%. Number 9 from Cherokee Trail received 12.9%. Pretty similar process going through for 2 and 3. People that were interested in number 2 also voted for number 4 as their second choice. So pretty much what we heard today was reflected in the feedback. So I want to open it up to the committee right now. I did share this data with you, but if there's any questions you have that I can answer, or any questions you have from some of the data that Ryan Casey gave me, I'd be happy to see if I can determine that. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I will open up the floor really to our committee. If you have questions you would like to ask our presenters, you may do so. If you would like to express what you feel like the direction our committee should go, we can do that as well. Again, we kind of have all of those choices out in front of us as far as how we move forward. And I guess at this point, I will just open it up to committee members to let me know what you're thinking.
Yeah, this is Matt. I think, looking at all these proposals, there's 4 or 5 of them that are basically the same thing, but I think I'd like to make a motion for Ernie's because that takes in consideration that freshman that's tough and makes it, makes a run at being a regional champ and getting those points, but and also just adding all the other points into everything else. I mean, you're just going to have a higher point total when you're doing the seeding, but I think that's probably the simplest one out of some of those other ones that, like JJ's, that was pretty complex, or seems to me like it's complex, but I'd like to make a motion on proposal number 1.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I really liked number 1 as well. Interesting to know, the coaches were pretty high percentage with number 2. And those are pretty different ways to seed. So, I wouldn't mind second. I'd like to hear a little more on what people are thinking between the 2 of them.
Sure, that would be fine. We can have that discussion after we either have a second or not. So, Tom, were you?
Yeah, I'll second it because I like that one, but I want to hear what people say. Yeah, go ahead and put me down as a second for that one.
All right, sounds good. So it's been moved and seconded that we approve proposal number 1. I know there are some questions and things, so let's do our due diligence, take some time and make sure we answer those questions. And just see how this discussion goes. We're in no rush at all today. So Tom, I think you were kind of asking the differences between proposal 1 and proposal 2. And again, I don't think Ernie has jumped back on yet.
Yeah, I guess maybe to hear some more of the committee members, what their thoughts are. Mm-hmm. Just looking at the survey results, and I know we got less than half of the coaches respond, but obviously there's something with those 2 that they liked, and actually I liked both of them, but they're probably the 2, really 2 different ones out of all of them. Anyone else have any thoughts on those?
Committee, let's hear your thoughts.
I'm just
Sorry, I
reading.
just started skimming over them again because there was so much between all
Yeah.
of them that I wanted to go
Yeah.
back through what I was actually hearing.
I agree. I'm just trying to read through both of them quick here.
Sure. So I think really kind of the major difference, and Dave, Brian, you can jump in here. I'm not, I'm trying to see if there was anything in your proposal for how we seed those regional champions, or if it's just simply the template that you put down there. So for Dave, Brian, was that just, you were just looking at going back to that kind of system? Whereas Ernie's, I see, has a procedure in place to seed those top four, those regional champions.
Yeah, so this is Rick and Fort Lupton. They look very similar to me. The only thing that Ernie's addresses is really those freshmen that come in.
Mm-hmm.
Travis, our proposal was just kind of going back to the old way of just a random draw, which, you know, and it didn't account for like the freshmen or those up and coming underclassmen that deserve that number one seed. So if you were voting between those two, you know, I would vote for Ernie's as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, what I see, Dave, thanks for that. What I see in there is, you know, the number two would be probably the simplest way to do it, but I think we'd run into more issues and we'd be right back here next year trying to come up with a system that's going to keep, you know, the best wrestlers from facing each other. So that's where I came down to number one, where it really truly seeds them.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here a little bit too. Though I agree, Tom. I think that's part of the reason why we moved in the direction we did a year ago. Is for some of those concerns we were seeing. So some things that we were hearing previously, and part of the reason why we moved away, and again, this is just for discussion. This is just to put information out there. This is not to promote one method over another. Some of the arguments we heard last year for going away from this system were that there was concerns that team points were not accurate in the old system, just simply by placing them randomly in there, that the team scores were not as accurate as if we were to seed it out. The concern isn't necessarily so much on the front side of the bracket as it is the back side of the bracket, and feeling that kids were not able to potentially wrestle out to where they would if it was a true seeded bracket, and that is you know, that could change how the team seeding or the team points play out.
Can we ask Ty how his is different from Ernie's?
We can, yes. I'll get to that in just a second, if that's okay. We had also heard comments last year that if our seeding process, you know, that we use for regionals is good enough to seed regionals, why can we not use something similar to do a true seed for state? And those were a couple of the arguments that I heard last year. John asked if we could have Ty jump on and kind of let us know how his is different than potentially Ernie's here. And I'm trying to find Ty's. Ty, are you still there?
I'm still here. The only way that mine really isn't different. It's just going back to the old method where only the individual carried the points that they earned, and Ernie's is taking the cumulative points in the weight class.
Yep. So yours follows, that same procedure we would have before. So if that regional champion had 5 points, they carried that over, and then we didn't add on, you know, if the second place finisher had 3 additional points, we're not tacking that on.
Yes, the system that worked for 30 years.
Yeah, that previously that we took those regional champions and we seeded those 4 based on the criteria we had with returning state points and so on. Okay. So I would see, if I'm surmising maybe the difference between Ty's and Ernie's, is that really that potentially by adding those regional points to the regional champion to seed the 4, that gives credence maybe to a freshman that, that doesn't have any points that they're coming back with. I know that has been a discussion point for us over the years, is that how do we, what do we do with that freshman that comes in and does well? So at least it appears to me, if I'm thinking through this correctly, that Ernie's proposal takes into account and gives that freshman then credit by assigning all of those returning state points to that regional champion, instead of just the regional champions carrying through their returning state points. Hopefully I didn't make that very confusing for everybody.
Here's a quick question, and Ernie addressed it real quick. What do you do with somebody who moves in from another state? I mean, I was just trying to read through it, and I don't think it was part of it. Does that person get, are we going to see that person at and I mean, I know might not even be close to but I mean, I wonder if that will have any impact on this. If you have a kid that moves in from Kansas and is a state champ, because he did address that real quick, and I think he was.
Right. So Jeff, that is actually a separate proposal.
Okay.
So I think what we could do is we can figure out what we want to do with our tournament, and then we'll go through and we'll address that piece specifically and see if we want to include that or not.
So basically, if we approved Ernie's or whoever we can add to it.
Yes.
If we feel that's I think taking pieces and okay, perfect.
Yep. So again, and that was kind of my opening statement, that if something is passed second, that it can be applied to, or that what we passed previously.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we are all, because I think that's a good point to add to them. So perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Can I point something out with that, or just kind of ask a question?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. So with the proposal from number 1, where the regional champ gets all the points, the only place where I kind of see that being an issue is, say you have a kid that's a 2-time state champ, so he has 12 points, and maybe in another region the other kid is a 2-time runner-up, so you'd have 10 points. But then there's also a kid that took 3rd there, so he's going to take that points with him. He'd get the 1 seed over a kid that's already won twice. That kind of situation. Am I kind of looking at that right?
Could you walk through that again real quick?
Okay, so if I understand it right, the regional champ gets all the points for all the qualifiers.
Yes.
Take with them. So in a situation where a regional champion is a 2-time state champion, he's got 12 points.
Okay.
Now in another, and maybe nobody else is placed in his region, so there's only 12 points there.
Mm-hmm.
Now in another region, maybe there's a 2-time runner-up, or we could even say a 2nd and a 3rd. He took previous years, so he has those points. So if he took 2nd 2 times, he has 10 points. But there happens to be someone else in that region who took 3rd or 4th. So now that region has more points, but the 2-time state champ would now get a lower seed just because his region, I don't know, wasn't as tough.
Because quote unquote, he had a weaker region.
Yeah, but he still is very accomplished, but he's being penalized for being placed in the region he's in.
I think that's a good question to ask, and something for our committee to ponder. I would say in that point, you probably have the top 1 and 2 seeds, and they're going to be on the opposite side of the bracket, and they're going to settle that thing in the finals. Because if you're the new kid and you just beat somebody that's placed 2nd a couple times and somebody that beat 3rd, you probably deserve to be in that conversation. However, point well taken that scenario could happen. Okay. I'll throw this thought out there just for people to mull on, and John can tell me that this is a bad idea or not. Another thing our committee could do, if again, it's hard to tell exactly where we're at on the topic. I'm guessing we have some thinking one philosophy and some thinking another. If we're worried about the details about the proposal as well and trying to iron those out and feel like we need time to maybe to vet a certain philosophy a little bit more, we could make a recommendation to move in one direction or another. And then we could work as a committee to iron out the specific details of what that's going to look like and get that proposal together and put that recommendation forward. I do know we are under some time constraints to get this committee report finalized and presented for the Legislative Council timelines. So again, John, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn if this is something we cannot do.
You're okay. We would have to have it done.
Okay, so John's saying we would have to have it done by the end of business Thursday. But if the committee feels better about saying, hey, we want to go this direction and we want to go back to let's just say we want to go, the committee decides they want to go to a true seed format, but we want time to pull these pieces together from the different proposals and look at that a little closer. I think we have that opportunity as well. The window is short. But I just wanted to throw that out there that if that's something the committee would feel more comfortable in doing, we could do that as well. But again, you would have to be available Tuesday, Wednesday, and most of Thursday to try and get that done. And John is happy to do that, happy to support that. I will have some constraints if that's the direction we want to go. But I trust that this committee could do the work needed to be done and with John's help there. And again, not trying to discount the motion that's on the floor whatsoever, just offering another alternative if we so choose. And Ernie is back on the call if we have specific questions to him as well.
If we adopt any policy, Travis, is this a 2-year commitment, 1 year? You know, let's say as a majority, we adopt number 1, number 2, whatever. Is it something, next year we meet, we're like, okay, this is what we learned. Let's make a couple tweaks here and there. Or is it, hey, we got to stick with this for 2 years. Then they may, what is the.
Well, I think currently we're in a process where we've had the new system 1 year and we're looking at potentially modifying it or adapting it. And so we would have that flexibility next year to adjust and try and refine if we felt like we needed to.
Perfect. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Other comments from the committee?
I think what I'm hearing is most people are wanting to go back to the old way, but that there are some tweaks within that we need to focus on. And I think we almost need to take that time to sit back and ponder out what those are going to be.
I believe that I would agree with that statement. In my opinion, I believe the people we are hearing from, it sounds like want to go back to the old method. I don't know if we're hearing from everybody. That would be my only caveat. And again, I'm not trying to dissuade or speak one way or another at all. Just to point out, again, when we see the survey results, it's 60-40 basically to go back or stay. I mean, that's not a large majority. And when you only have a third of the coaches that have responded, that is data. I think we just need to make sure that we understand what we're looking at there. I do agree, Rachel. I think those that we're hearing from currently are in favor of moving back the other direction. I'm not sure if we're hearing from the voices that are okay with where we are at.
I'm Sandra from Chatfield. I agree that with Rachel, like we should take some time and figure it out as a committee.
on your point about not hearing from others, I think those that really have a problem are going to voice their concerns. You're going to have several coaches that are just going to go with the flow and let things be and not necessarily voice it or submit a survey.
That is correct too. I wholeheartedly agree with that there are those out there that are okay, whichever direction we go.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know Jeremy put it in the chat that the coach from TCA suggested kind of letting this go for a 2-year cycle so we can collect more data. I'm kind of on board with that because I know after 1 year, everything does kind of suck. And then after that second year, when we've seen kind of more play out, we might not be as hateful of the system. So, I mean, I was kind of on board with that, but I'm also the new guy. So,
yeah. And again, I would remind the board that we did intentional work last year. We did not just willy-nilly go and change the seating system. Nobody, was blind to the fact that there would be probably bumps in the road and that there would be people that did not agree with the change and did not like it. We did intentional work to reach out last year. Spoke with several constituents across the state. I mean, every committee member that was on the subcommittee reached out and talked to people in their area and got feedback back. And, that's how we got to the new system as well. So, again, there are, like I said, even in our survey here, there are 40% that like the true seating. There are 60 that prefer the other method. There were people last year that really were voicing that we needed to do something different. There are two strong philosophies here. And so, really happy to support whichever direction the committee wants to go on this. I know there were members on the committee last year that did not like the direction we were headed. And that's just kind of where it came from. But just again, a reminder that, it was intentionally thought out last year. And, again, after 1 year, I'm not sure how much data we have. But again, when you look at the data that John presented on semifinalist qualifiers, those top 4 placers, all of those pieces, both systems were quite similar.
We had a vote to move forward in a second on one of the proposals or just making a change? Nope. Can you recap that real quick?
Yes, currently the motion that's on the floor is to adopt Ernie's proposal. And that is that has a point system awarded to the regional champion from each region. They would be awarded returning points for each person within that regional weight class that they won. And those points would be used in the seeding of the top 4 qualifiers for the state tournament. And I was trying to see what the other pieces of that are. And again, there are pieces of there that if there are ties, what the next criteria is that we're going to use in terms of winning percentage, total wins, winning percentage at that weight class, and so on. And then after the top 4 seeds are established, head-to-head criteria would be used from the top down. And that there must be clear evidence. Again, you have to have won more matches against that individual than the other. If you were tied 1-1 or 2-2, that's not clear evidence to move that person in those top 4 seeds. And then once the top 4 seeds are placed on the bracket, then all other state qualifiers from each region will be placed on the bracket, depending on where the regional champion was placed.
Do we vote as a committee on that with the assumption that we can still get together or that we want to still get together between now and Thursday and tweak it if necessary or add concerns or comments? Or is that
I believe if we're following probably the proper rules of order, we need to vote on this motion as presented. And so if we would like that opportunity to maybe iron out some details and look at some other pieces of this, then we would not want to pass this as presented. And then we would need probably a new motion after that is to determine where we were going to go with it. So at this point, we can have more discussion. We can, if here are the options on the table for us currently. We can go to a vote and vote on this proposal. We can have additional discussion if we need it, or Matt can withdraw his motion. Those are the things that are on the table for us currently, based in the state of the motion. If there's no further discussion, then I will call for a vote. If the motion passes, then that is currently what is approved. At that point, I guess we would have we could open it up for any further motions that need to take place. But it would be approved as presented. If it fails, then we would still be reverted back to the old system currently. And again, the opportunity for new motions would be present. So just try and make sure everybody knows what they're voting on, because sometimes I know that gets confusing.
Thank you, because I was just going to ask that question.
Are there questions? Are there any further questions or things I can clarify on about what we are currently voting on?
I have a quick question. So we would seed out the top 4 kiddos from the region. And then, if I understand it correctly, track wrestling has the ability to randomize the rest of it for the 2, 3, and 4, right? I think if we go back to us, I want to make sure that coaches can't predict where kids are going to fall on the bracket. And if I understand it correctly, track can do that for us. Is that true?
I am not going to write any guarantees on what track can or cannot do. That is not something that I think I can speak to directly here. I do understand your concern about trying to randomize, and I think that is something that the committee could look at and talk about is that something that we can do to try and help make sure that
Is that the direction?
I think Ernie's proposal, I don't know that Ernie's proposal specifically says how they will each be placed. It just says that each different.
Depending on where their regional.
Yep. Yep. So in Ernie's, it doesn't specifically say just that those regional finishers will be placed in a different quarter bracket.
Okay, and I think that's a pretty important deal if we go back to this, that coaches cannot predict where kids fall at the state tournament. We're going to have kids forfeiting at regionals. We're going to have coaches doing different stuff because they know where their kids are going to fall. So the rest of the kids need to be randomized, and it probably need to be randomized weight by weight.
Ernie, do you want to add any to that?
I'd be happy to. I think when I put that proposal in, I think it does say that the 1 and the 4 would be on one side and 2 and the 3 would be on another side.
Correct.
Excuse me, I came back out. It's windy. I'm going back in. Your wind noise. I guess my question is, part of it is when I put in the proposal around the intentional forfeits, and I don't know what you guys discussed on that or not, but how big of a deal is that? Because I've not seen it happen at any of the regions I've been at. But I know coaches have, and I know coaches have said that they've heard quite a bit that it happens. So, that's just a question, rhetorical for me right now is it really that big of a problem? I do think it's important that if you're the 2 and the 3, that you're opposite the 1. I think back to last year, 3A region at Sierra where you had Fort Lupton's kid and then Woodland Park's kid. So 4 championships between the 2 of them. And then the Severance kid who ended up 4th that year. You know, if you don't have those 2 and the 3 on the opposite side from the one of those guys is going to end up seeing somebody in the semifinals, and hopefully it's not going to be the state champion and the 3-time state champion. You know, which if you randomize it, you still have that issue. So that's the one thing I would ask that you guys take into account, that you know, randomizing it kind of defeats the purpose of any kind of seating that we're trying to get done, in my mind. And so my proposal did have the 2 and the 3 on the opposite side of the regional champion.
Okay.
And Ernie, I agree with you. I guess my point more specific is if it's laid out in our handbook prior to the season that we know that region 1 or region 1 will wrestle region 2, and everybody knows exactly how it's going to fall, then I think coaches can manipulate at regionals. So I think that needs to be, but I agree with you, 1 and 4 opposite, 2 and 3, all that good stuff. I agree with that. But if we all know exactly what region is going to wrestle what region come into the state tournament, I think that's where we're going to have stuff happen.
Well, I think part of the things that you can do, that John can do here as the commissioner, is make sure that all 16 regions, all 20 regions, all 24 regions, when we get the second classification of the girls, they all follow the same schedule, the exact same schedule, so that everybody's finals are all starting at the same time, and you're concentrating on your kid's match instead of somebody's results from a different region because they're an hour or 2 ahead of you. If everybody's on the same schedule, how are you going to predict whether your kid should forfeit or not?
And Ernie, that is on our agenda today to talk about that specific concern there.
Okay.
So that is something that's on our agenda later, committee, that we're going to touch base on, is those regional protocols and how we're following through on those. I do kind of feel like I'm hearing maybe 2 different issues currently. And so just kind of in trying to help keep this thing moving along in an efficient manner, I think that the idea of the intentional forfeits and knowing where kids are going to be seated against those other regions, that is a topic. And I think that's a piece within this regional proposal that we can look at. Maybe that's not something we have a solution for today, but that could be something we look at and we research over the next year, is how many of those forfeits are taking place, how many of those things are happening, and what can we do to help alleviate that moving forward if we move back to the other system, the previous system. So I think that is an issue we can handle and we can address. And I don't know that we need to solve it before we decide which direction we're going to go. But I do agree, it's something I think we need to look at and see if we can address that.
I can speak up, Travis, really quick. This is Dave. So back in the old days, I can remember Stan Lampy telling his kids if they lost, they were going to have to wrestle against the number 1. So that just validates it even more. If you're a coach that's telling your kid he needs to lose or forfeit his match in the finals, he's going to hit a number 1 in the quarters. If he wins it, the first time he should hit a number 1 wouldn't be until the semis. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of validates it even more why you'd want to stick with the regional. Plus, if your regional is a super stud regional, and let's say you have like every single region always has their weight class that's weak, and every single one of them always has their weight class that's super strong. If you're in a super strong, at least that puts one of your 1, 2, 3, and 4 all into different quarterfinals. That way you have that chance to have a kid from your region in the semis, in all 4 of those spots in the semis. And I've seen that happen before in the past. And it was kind of like what Ernie was just talking about with 138s last year. Geez, the best guys were all in one region, and they sure showed it because they were all in the semis. If we would have seeded it based on depending on their win-loss records and all that, who knows what would happen? Because well, unless the coaches were really good, and there are coaches that are really good. They know what everybody else's win percentage is. They know what everybody else's record is. They know what people's head-to-head is, and they can really specifically place their person in the bracket just by deciding who you're going to wrestle or who you're not. And it could happen as, 2 weeks before regionals when you have people ducking out of matches because they don't want to take a loss against a state champ.
All right, committee, thanks, Dave. Any other thoughts, questions before we call for a vote? And I don't mean to cut anybody short or anything like that, but I do feel like we need to keep moving forward in case, depending on how this vote goes. Any questions on what you're voting for, committee, or what your options are? Okay, at this time, I will call for a vote. The motion on the floor is to pass proposal 1 as presented with no modifications. And I will go ahead and do our vote now. Again, please, if you can, go ahead and say yes, that you vote for it, or give me a thumbs up if your volume is not working. If we're not sure on the vote, we'll make sure we get that. Sean, Rocky Ford.
No.
Okay. Matt, Ray.
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, Cherokee Trail.
No.
Sandra Chatfield.
No.
Rachel Mead.
No.
John is not on here. Pat, can you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Pat is a thumbs down. No. Rick, Fort Lupton.
Yes.
Tom, Eagle Valley.
Yes.
And Jason, Prairie View.
No.
Okay, based on my count, we have 3 yeses and 6 nos. So that motion fails. Okay. All right, at this time, I would ask the committee if they have any other motions or proposals they would like to make in regards to the seating.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Ernie's proposal with the opportunity to tweak it.
Okay.
So we can discuss it as a committee with a few, items to make it a little better.
I will second that.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt, again, proposal 1 with the opportunity that the committee can work this week to kind of vet that out and see if there are any other tweaks or any other modifications that or adjustments that need to be made prior to submitting the report for the legislative council meeting on Thursday. Any discussion from that? Okay. Before we vote, John, are there any thoughts, questions, concerns you have about this potential modification period that we just need to make sure the committee is aware of before? Okay, John just says we need to move quickly.
But I do think it's important that we have some data in front of us.
Okay. So then procedurally, what I see happening, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Basically, we would follow back up as a committee here in the next couple of days with some data. We would talk specifically about this proposal, and then there would be a final recommendation that would be put forward and voted upon by the committee that would be included in our committee report and included in the rest of the work from our day today. Okay, John said that's correct. Any questions or concerns from our committee? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and call for a vote on the proposal that's on the table. And that is to approve proposal number 1 from Holy Family with the opportunity to adjust and modify as needed prior to our final submittal. Sean, Rocky Ford,
Yes.
Matt Brown, Ray,
Yes.
Jeff Buck, Cherokee Trail,
Yes.
Sandra Chatfield,
Yes.
Rachel Mead,
Yes.
Pat. Pat is a no. Rick Jacoby, Fort Lupton,
Yes.
Tom, Eagle Valley,
Yes.
Jason Humphrey, Prairie View.
Yes.
Okay. That motion passes with a count of 8-1. Okay, looking at our agenda here. We do have a few more things on the agenda to go through. That's what I was thinking. We will take a short break. We will take a 7-minute break and we will reconvene at 11:45. All right, welcome back. Thank you for the short break. We'll go ahead and keep proceeding through our agenda at this point. So I think we had Ernie talk about this earlier briefly, his proposal for out-of-state points. To summarize, it is proposing that those that move in from out of state, that we include their points in our calculations when we do regional placements and state seating. So I would open that up to the committee for discussion and if they would like to make a proposal or make a motion. Yep, yep, go ahead.
So a situation, actually two situations this year did affect this scenario where we had two kids from out of state that were placers that received 0 points, were seated within our tournament. You could argue they were seated low because of this. I know a kid from La Junta got upset. I don't know if it was an upset, but lost to a kid from Severance that did not receive any out-of-state points. The La Junta kid was a 2 seed, so they met really early.
I'd make a motion that we accept out-of-state points for seeding at the state tournament.
I'd second that.
Matt seconded it. You got the original? Okay. Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded to include out-of-state points in our calculations. Any further discussion?
How do we, what does that look like? Meaning, is a state champ going to receive the same points as a state champ in the state of Colorado, or does that make, I mean,
I think that would be the way, again, I'll have to, I think that's what the proposal states, and I don't know how we would.
Because I'm just reading the proposal now, again.
So let me get to it here.
Because like in California, for example, they place the top 8, right? And I think we're all aware certain states are pretty good at wrestling. You know, you're placing in California top 8. I mean, that's worth more than 1 point if it's comparable to like a 6th. So I think we just need to, I don't know what the right way to, system is, but,
I think at this point, again, with the new concept and bringing it in, it would match what we currently do. We do know that there may be some of those outliers out there. Hopefully this helps to minimize those, but we could always entertain a proposal in the future if there are, other ways that we could look at qualifying or quantifying those different states. I think it does get a little murky there trying to figure that out. So, but based on the proposal here, it would match what we currently offer our in-state kids.
So 6 would be 6, 7th and 8th wouldn't count.
Yep, 7th and 8th wouldn't count. It would just be through 6th place.
Okay, I mean, I think that's great. And I don't know how many states place top 8, but I think maybe, I don't know if there's a part B to that where it could be added that if a kid comes from a state that has top 8, but again, I don't know how many of those do it. I mean, kid comes from California and moves in, and they placed 8th. They definitely could upset and mess up a bracket pretty quick. So I'm just wanting to address that with everybody so they're kind of aware of that.
Okay. And again, that could be after we make this proposal. If you wanted to make a follow-up motion, Jeff, you could do that, or that's something we could bring back to the committee again next year. Any other thoughts or discussion about the motion that's on the table? Okay. Seeing none, I will go ahead and call for a vote on the out-of-state points being used in Colorado with our same format. Let me get my sheet out here. Sean,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Sandy, am I going too fast?
No.
Okay. Sandra,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Pat. He's a thumbs up. He's a yes. Rick,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jason.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. All right, the next proposal that was submitted is on intentional forfeits. I know Ernie touched on this briefly. We talked about this a little bit during our seating conversation as well. You know, it's that age-old conversation of how do we, you know, how do we make people do the right thing all the time? And how do we regulate ethics? We definitely have different rules on the books in different sports for how to do these kinds of things. And so that is something that if the committee feels they would like to do, we have that leeway, we can do that. Or again, this is something we can monitor as we go back to the old system and see what we could do to try and help alleviate some of those issues. At this time, I'll take any discussion or any potential motions from the committee. Okay, not hearing anything or seeing anything, so we will move on to letter E in our discussion items. And that is a proposal that Mr. Durera put forth in regards to a dual state tournament. I would like to make note that if we were to move in this direction, that is something that we would need to do at the beginning of a cycle, not something we would look to entertain adding at a mid-cycle point. We would have several other committees and things that we would have to run this through as well and look at and make sure we have everything in place. So I don't think it would be prudent or likely we could get this going in a mid-cycle. I would like to have, if Ernie's still on here, have Ernie just speak to it, his proposal a little bit, and we can kind of take this as a first reading on the idea and the concept, and something we can have continued conversation on and work towards potentially starting in the next cycle.
So Travis, knowing that this, like you said, would have to take part at the beginning of a cycle, I was aware of that. To me, this was just a way to get the conversation started. You know, when you talk to different people, obviously it's split just like it is around seating. Some people like the idea of a dual meet state championship, some don't. The big thing that you run into with the people that do is when do you do it? And how do you select the teams? I just know that it's been a topic of conversation throughout the years, probably for the last 15, maybe a little bit longer than that. And with tennis, starting both a dual meet and an individual tournament. So we now have precedent within our association, because that was one of the big things in the past, right? You can't have two state championships for the same sport. Mm-hmm. Well, we now have that. So to me, this is an opportunity because everybody knows that the strategy around a dual meet is totally different than strategy around a tournament. And everybody knows that you can be a very strong dual meet team and maybe not be a team that can win the state tournament. I mean, if we had a dual meet state championship, I'm thinking that Thompson Valley would have several of those, even though they only have one state championship from the individual events. The other thing that I look at here is it gives you an opportunity to get more kids involved in a state competition because you're involving the entire team. And those kids can still feel like they're a part of something, whether I win or I lose. If I lose and I keep it to a decision instead of getting a tech fall or something along those lines, I prevent the other team from scoring points. And that might be my contribution to us winning that particular duel. And then the last thing that I'll say about it to me is, this sport has been under attack, not only at the state level, but at the national and even international level. It was only a couple of Olympics cycles back that wrestling had been chopped. And, through a concerted effort worldwide, Olympic wrestling was saved. When you look at what we're doing now within high school sports, high school wrestling in particular, we don't have very many opportunities to wrestle in front of our home crowds. Duels are pretty much the only time that's going to happen, because even if you host a tournament, chances are you're not getting the casual fan to come and show up at a tournament, because it's an all-day affair and you never know when the kid that you're wanting to watch is going to be there. A dual meets something different. It's an opportunity for us to bring some excitement to our schools on a weekday, in the evening. It's an opportunity for us to possibly use that opportunity of a duel to recruit our halls and some of these kids that are coming to think that, hey, this looks like fun. Maybe I'll give it a try next year. And to me, it's just one of those benefits. One of the things that'll come out of it that'll benefit the sport is focusing on the team aspect of a dual meet state championship. I know there's reasons to not do it. I get that. That some people might not wrestle their best kids because they might get hurt for the individual championship or what have you. But to me, if you focus on team aspect and you understand that, hey, what we're doing is for the benefit of our team and for the benefit of our school, I think you can get the vast majority of the coaches to actually agree to fully take part in this tournament if they were invited.
Okay. I want to thank you for putting the proposal forward, for starting the conversation. Excellent points there. Cannot emphasize enough, how important duels are to our schools and our communities and to our wrestlers, and especially from showcasing our kids' standpoint and in a recruiting standpoint. They're huge. They're a huge piece. And so happy to entertain conversations around the idea of the dual state tournament. At this point, again, I think it would be best served if we were to take a year to have those discussions with our constituents. Again, ask good questions and move intentionally with this. Hopefully at this point next year, we would have maybe a good opportunity for us to put that proposal forward in a spot where we could start that for the next cycle. Again, committee members, discussion, thoughts, questions for Ernie, concerns?
Travis, if I may, I guess before you even put it off to saying starting the conversation next year or pushing the conversation to next year, could we have a feel from the committee as to whether this is something that they think is worthwhile to discuss next year? Because if it's not, then don't put it on your agenda for next year. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, if there's at least people that are willing to say, yes, I'm interested in having the discussion because I think it's worthwhile, that's great. But if all the 9 committee members that are present are saying, hey, this isn't something that we're ready for, and I don't think we will be next year, then that's fine. It just, I'll know not to prepare for anything for next year.
I think, this is Matt. I think it's a great idea and it'd be good for the state. Just some big questions coaches are going to have is if you do it, you've got to do it before regionals and state, because if you try to do it after state, it's going to be a mess like the super state or grand state was back in the 90s. You're going to have kids way overweight. And after the individual state tournament, it seems like they're want to, and goes downhill pretty quick. And is it going to cost points? Coaches are going to ask that question too, if it's going to cost them points. So that would be just two concerns.
Okay. Other committee members, is this something that we want to pursue over the next year and see if we can get some questions answered and a plan put forward?
Yeah, Ernie, I think it's a great idea. I think the logistics is going to be a little tougher, but I would move forward with it. I think it'd be a great thing to have.
I'm definitely open to listening for more.
Oh, Rachel, I think yours got cut off. Go ahead and go again.
Oh, sorry. I'm definitely open to listening for more and getting more details. I think it's a good idea, but I think there's more involved than just what's at stake today.
Okay. I see Jeff shaking his head yes. So, okay. Well, with that, we'll work on a plan moving forward, and Ernie will be in contact, and we'll just we'll see how this evolves and what we can put together. All right.
Thank you, Travis.
You're welcome. All right, moving on to discussion item B. Okay, there's the other items here that we have listed. Want to, in just kind of getting some things going for this year, we've been working through the regional host piece and regional placements for next year. And with working with John, we kind of realized that some of these things are not necessarily set in stone and haven't been written out and aren't in a real formal space for us. And so John wants to have some conversation with you about these items and how we have been doing them, and just kind of reconfirm what we're doing so that he can work on kind of getting that into more of a formal setting for us in the bulletin for next year. Trying to work on transparency and making sure that all coaches know how we get to these kinds of things. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John to talk to you about the regional placements and procedures for next year.
Thank you. Travis hit the nail on the head. For me, coming in new this year, just trying to figure out, who was hosting in the past, what the process was. I didn't really see a whole lot written down, so I'd like the results of this conversation to be entered into the bulletin, so people are aware of who's hosting, how we determine the hosts, and so on. One thing Travis and I were looking at when we talked, once when we look at 4A through 2A and girls, once the snaked procedure is taken care of, teams are essentially placed in their regions due to geography. That would ensure then that each region has a host for their geographical area. So I would like to say that the first line below the snake, whoever appears there in each region would be responsible for finding the host for their particular region. Is a way that I would like to, I guess, have it written down into the bulletin, unless there are objections to that. But with 5A snaking it the whole way, there would need to be a different process. I also want to ensure, and I know we have some things in place for 5A and 4A, that every other cycle a Western Slope team gets to host it. I also want to ensure that it doesn't become a burden for a school that's getting chosen year in and year out to host. Sometimes some schools do want to host it, but it can be a financial burden. And I also think it's a good idea to give opportunity to others in the state to be able to host a region if they so desire. So if we're okay with assigning the school underneath the snake in each region to find the host, what do the next steps look like? Do we ask just the people in that region specifically who would like to host? What if nobody wants to? And we had situations this year where we were in September, October, we were still looking for regional hosts. And that's just not fair for coaches and ADs to not know where you're going. And it's also very difficult to place schools in an appropriate region. If I'm Montezuma Cortez, and we put them in a region, here in March, and we don't determine the host until a later time, we might not be putting them in the right region. We might be asking them to go an extra 3 or 4 hours, which just doesn't seem right. So just like to open up this discussion if possible, please.
Quick, this is Jeremy Kenyon. This year we asked to host, and I don't think that we've ever hosted a regional tournament. We've had conflicts with stuff here. So this year we were able to go ahead and host. Discovery Canyon threw their hat in the mix as well. And then I went to a vote. I don't feel that everybody was represented in that vote, but then Discovery got it again. I think the last 5-6 years, Discovery has hosted a number of times. I think that we need to have something in place that if there are a couple schools in the region that want to host, I think by default, it should default to the individuals that have never had a chance or maybe haven't hosted in a while. And I agree, none of us want to travel, blah, 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 blah. But to be fair to all of us across the state, I think if teams want to host and haven't hosted in a while, they should get that opportunity.
Hey guys, this is Dave. Can I poke one word in there?
One word, Dave.
All right, here goes. Back in the old days, we went alphabetical order through the conference when I was up in Brush. Everybody had a chance to take it. It was up to the ADs to decide it. And then just by default, nobody wanted it. So we had it in Brush for a lot of years until Eaton wanted to start having it. And then it went to Eaton and it did the same thing for quite a while.
I know.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Curtis, North Fork High School. I know John and I have talked a little bit about this, and calling a few other coaches, especially Western Slope 2A region, like how did it fall? And I didn't know if there was some sort of nomination process that came from your athletic directors. Because like Dave said, I feel like there for a handful of years, Paonia had hosted it year after year. Then it became our turn in Hotchkiss before we combined. And then it went to the waterfall system. And I believe Cedar Edge hosted on the Western Slope there. But I was wondering if there was, because we were up in Hayden this past year and asking how did Hayden get it, it was just kind of by default. But would there be a better system of, hey, you nominate, or a nomination form or something like that if you would like to host, so we avoid the same people hosting year in and year out from that geographic region?
Well, and I believe that's how it's supposed to be done, is that any schools that are interested, currently the process has been any schools that are interested in hosting would nominate themselves, and then a vote goes out for all the regional schools. I think the changing in regions, how much they've changed so much from year to year now, because of the point system and the snake and things like that. I think that's part of where we used to do the geographic piece or the alphabetical piece, and we'd work our way down the regional, and you would have the asterisks and you would coordinate that host school, or you would have that opportunity. Now that schools are being pulled in and out all the time, just trying to go down alphabetically has become more difficult. And I think that's why that process has gone by the wayside, just with the addition of the snaking of schools and whatnot. John, are there other comments or things you're looking for that you want from the committee, or have you gotten enough feedback that what I would suggest, if the committee is okay with this, is that John would write up what he would like to see for that process moving forward, and he would send that to us, and then we could give him a thumbs up on those procedural things that he could add to the bulletin. And what we could do as a committee for our report is that we've charged John with formalizing those processes and including them in the bulletin. Any thoughts on that from the committee?
Just a quick question, probably to clarify for me again. So like the top 4 teams, they have the choice of the host, right? So they're still like rewarded for being a top 4 team in state. And then after that, you can default. If they default, then the next schools have the option to host regionals. Is that correct?
No, that's not how I thought it worked. And again, I think this is part of why John's brought this to us, is that no, it wasn't. Under my knowledge, I don't believe it was an automatic that if you're one of those top 4 teams in the snake that you got to host. Really, it was a vote of all of the teams within your region, including those that were snaked in. Where would you like for this to go? But again, if there are different processes we want in place, or we want to do something like that, we just need to let John know.
Matt Brown, I know you wanted to add something in terms of regional placement that could possibly affect this. Did you want to go ahead and speak on that now?
Yeah, I can. I talked about this last year. I know at our regional tournament, we had it in Sterling, and we've had it there for several years, but we do vote on a site, and then we vote on a host. And then we also say if, this team or whatever is not here, then we have a backup plan. But I still go back to having the 4 regions, like in 2A. We've had some teams out the last couple years out in Sterling. We had Cedar Edge a couple years ago, and then this year Dolores Forte was up there. It's just hard because they don't get fans to follow them as well as if they were in their own home region that we used to always do before we started snaking. And I know we started doing the waterfall system to try to get the regionals more even. It just goes, to me, it goes back to a financial deal. And I don't know if somebody can check with schools and see if that is a problem with them or not. But I know for some families that it is a huge issue to have to travel clear out here from Pueblo or up in the mountains and spend all the money on hotels and all that, and then turn around and do it again the next weekend at state. That's where 2A and 3A, I think, there's a lot more teams that way. That's all I got.
Yeah, Matt, that speaks to when we first started doing the snake or the waterfall. Those exact same concerns were echoed amongst our 2A, 3A reps. And that's why originally it had just been, I think maybe 4 2A schools were seated, or 8. I know 3A, it was 8 originally, and then we've expanded to 12 now. It's definitely a concern, especially when you're going to turn around and a lot of those schools are traveling to Denver again the next weekend. We have not, at least I have not heard a lot from schools that have been brought forward to the committee in terms of those, that travel. I do know that concern is out there. I don't know if that's something we can try and get a better handle on here within the next year, is how much travel are we willing to take, and what does that look like? Definitely.
I know talking to other, smaller schools, it definitely is a concern, the travel and the budget wise. However, it's one of those things where coming from different regions, you look at returning top 4 teams in 2A this year, 2 of them are West Slope teams, and, being able to snake and get out of it. And you hope it's a 1-year deal that you're returning enough kids that you can do it. But I also understand the financial responsibilities, the hardships on the families of having to go 2 times in a row, that travel. But I think it's one of those things where, we've adopted it to try splitting up, different areas that have, 4 or 5 really quality teams there. And I think getting one of those teams or even 2 of those teams kind of in different areas helps when they're so condensed on that side. But I totally understand the financial part of it and burden, you know, talking to teams that have traveled. It's a reward, but it's also a burden at the same time because you are one of those returning top teams. But I haven't heard anything as far as, you know, hey, we have to get away with that snake fall or waterfall, excuse me, from our area.
Okay. All right. John feels like he is good with what he needs to move forward with. So I believe if the committee is good with this, we will have him put some things in writing, get those processes ironed out, have him work with us really between now and the start of wrestling season to make sure that what's put in the bulletin is what we're doing moving forward. Okay. All right. The next point on here is kind of along the same veins with the regional host site, is that determining the regional team points and the returning state points and the state placers. This really hasn't ever been, I think, written down in the bulletin. It probably was put in a formal proposal at some point through the years, and it just kind of in the turnover. It's something that has been just maybe just kind of passed along by word of mouth, and John wants to make sure we get this formalized and put it into place. I also know that he had some discussions with me earlier in the year just about how we do it, and do we need to look at doing this a little bit differently, and are the points that we're assigning, are they equitable? So at this point, I'll turn it over to John because he wants to, again, get some feedback from the committee as he formalizes some of these things and gets these processes in place in the bulletin moving forward. John?
Great, thank you. One of the concerns I had when I was just kind of going through placing teams in regions for next year is the idea that somebody who finished 5th in a region was awarded 1 point, which would be the same amount that somebody who finished 6th in state would be awarded as well. I know there were 2 regions that only had 5 kids in them. There was one region that had 6. So we're essentially awarding 1 point to a team for a kid that didn't win a match in regionals, but ended up finished 5th because of the size of the regional. I think what I would like to do is adjust the points and put I guess a larger premium on the state points and a smaller proponent on the regional points, but still valuing those as well. So the model that I'm looking at, would like to have discussed today, would also only give regional points, give points to the state placers coming out of a region. And I know we discussed the true 4th, and there's been some questions in the past about who actually gets those points. So this would, proposal earlier would fix that, but this would fix it as well. So the current model right now has 1st place with 6 points and goes down to 6th place with 1 point for state placing. Regional starts at 3 and goes down by a ½ point down to 6, which is 0.5 points. Okay. What I'd like to do is adjust this model if possible and have state points start at 6 and go down by a ½ point. So it would be 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, down to 3.5 for 6th place. So a 6th place state finisher would essentially earn 3.5 points, whereas state qualifier coming 1st out of a region would be awarded 3 points, 2nd place 2.5, 3rd 2, and 4th place 1.5. So no points awarded for 5th and 6th. Some of the benefits of the proposal. Again, I think we're giving some points to some people that may not really truly be earning them. I think there is a disparity in the value of those points. Some of the negatives for this proposal would be we're only awarding state placers, so we might it might have some fifth and sixth placers that have earned points in the past that would no longer be earning these points. So like to open that up to any discussion.
All right, committee members, what do you think about the potential adjustments there in how we calculate the returning state points?
I like the idea. I think the state tournament's a bigger tournament. The points ought to be worth more. So I think that's a good thing to look towards. Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay.
I second that. I like the system that John's proposed, giving more value to that sixth place finisher over at state compared to that fifth and sixth place. Especially, I know in the smaller schools, we do see a lot of regions that, I mean, there's 5 kids. Our 190 pounder, he placed 6 by default, didn't win a single match, and he would count again, count towards this next year's regional seeding, even though he didn't win a single match. And I know that there's other regions that are kind of in that same boat, but like that proposal for that system that John had.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Curtis was the second. We'll just is there any further discussion before we vote? Nope. All right. Sean?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Pat? We may have lost Pat. We'll see. Rick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Curtis? Okay. All right.
Pat gave the thumbs up.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel.
Trevor's got a class in a couple of minutes.
Yes, we can. Yep. So we are going to go ahead and where is this at? Did we?
Regional track seating protocol.
Okay, yep, we're gonna go to see regional track seating protocol proposal put forth by Trevor Newton. Trevor, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. So this is really a modification to the process of how we build regional brackets. What we're really looking for here is consistency across all regions. Just to give you a little background context, because the site of the regionals change throughout from year to year, we're finding that tournament directors who are hosting those tournaments sometimes have very limited experience. And they may be familiar with the track protocol or track wrestling protocols, but unfamiliar with the CHSAA protocols. Currently, the CHSAA bylaws do not line up with what track wrestling does well. So currently, the way it works is you seed the top 8 wrestlers, then the buys are placed on the bracket with the higher seeds, and then the remaining seeded wrestlers are placed on the bracket according to their seeds. So in order to do that, you quite literally have to draw in out of a hat or whatever preferred method is, and then manually move the wrestlers in seed order. So if you have, let's say 14 wrestlers in a bracket, that leaves you 2 buys, and you pull a buy at 10, then 9 would stay where they were, but that original 10 seed wrestler would then be moved to 11, kind of move on down the pike. Now, what I will say is it's relatively easy to do that. It's time consuming as a tournament director. It's relatively easy to do that, but it's not happening. And it's just really inconsistent over what's happening across the regions. The way track wrestling system is designed, and I believe the Canyon coach earlier alluded to this a little bit, is that you do have the opportunity to randomize it. So what I'm proposing is that we would seed the top 8 wrestlers, and then you would on track wrestling go to seed through 8, And then wrestlers 9 through 16 are then randomly drawn in with the buys in the bracket. What this does is ensures that your quarters, your halves are all even all throughout the bracket. Teams are already distributed evenly because there's only one wrestler, but also ensures consistency. And it's a very simple process for a new tournament director to utilize correctly. So at this point, I guess I'll open up for questions and see what you guys are thinking on this.
Yes, go ahead.
I did want to add one thing to Trevor's comments and speaking to Pete Isaias with USA Wrestling. He had also approached me about the same issue that Trevor just spoke upon and gave the same recommendation that Trevor did.
So committee, what this proposal will do is we would add this into our regional director bulletins as far as how we assign those buys and how we build those brackets. And so there would be a step-by-step method for how to lay those brackets out so that each region is building those brackets in the same manner. Open that up to thoughts, questions, concerns. Okay, not seeing any, not hearing any, so we would need an action by a committee member to make a proposal on, or to make a motion.
I don't see a downside to it. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Tom, second by Rachel, to approve the bracketing, the regional bracketing proposal for drawing or for randomizing the buys. Sandra, are you ready for a vote?
Yep.
Okay. All right. John?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Pat? Rachel, keep an eye on Pat again. Rick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes, and there's a thumbs up from Pat.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
Yes.
Chris? Or Curtis, sorry. Curtis is yes. Okay. All right.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to letter D under other items. And this is something we talked about last year as a committee. I think we just need to revisit this as well and give John some direction here. Our regional tournaments currently, there is room for tournament directors to kind of run some things at different times and at different rates. And I think that I think it's important for our sport that with our qualifying tournaments, that they all operate in almost the identical manner. That they need to be consistent. We need to have consistent procedures in place so that we can say that all athletes qualified in the same manner. So do we have did we write a formal proposal for this? Yeah, okay. So there's a proposal there. Okay. Right, but yeah. So the proposal that we would like to put forward is that basically that all of our regionals are in a 2-day format. And that we eliminate the one day option so that all regionals can run on the same schedule. Again, the same qualifying scenario for all athletes. We don't run into match limit issues when we go to a 2-day format. We had situations, again, that people talk about how, well, it's just it potentially could happen that a kid can run out of matches and not be able to wrestle all the way out in the tournament. And it does happen. And it, you know, that it happened this year. And so those are situations that we want to avoid. So our recommendation would be that we move all regional tournaments to a 2-day format.
Would this include the girls' division too?
Yes.
That's what happened.
Yep, and that's where it happened twice. And I will tell you, I had a young lady in my office the day after regionals telling me about it. Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
I motion that we move forward with that.
Okay,
Just some things I've heard, Travis, from some small schools. I know they did like the
Sean,
ability.
can we hold on 1 second? Do we have a second for the motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, Tom seconds it. Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Okay, sorry. I know I'd heard from some small schools that they did like the ability to do the 1 day. I think especially on the girls' side. I just kind of wanted their voices to be heard too in this. So
Yeah. Yeah, we have heard that just trying to get 2 days and getting coaches there. And a lot of time coaches are coaching boys and girls, and that's a strain on the program. And those are challenges that we're trying to be cognizant of. At the same time, our girls wrestlers are due to every equal opportunity that our boys wrestlers are. And so if that's a standard protocol for our boys, then really it should be for our girls too. Other questions, thoughts?
Sandra from Chatfield. So one of the regions started on Friday and finished up that evening. And then from Chatfield's perspective, we ran it in one day, and we started in the morning and finished by like 7 o'clock, but we didn't have a 7-match rule. And then going into regionals, we emailed our roster just so they could clarify and make sure and double check that there was not going to be a 7-match stipulation or whatever for the wrestlers. So they were proactive with it. And I just think that if we just move forward with, the size of the regions and the weight classes, that we wouldn't hit that.
Okay. Yeah, and I know in our region, we did have that issue. And I know they reached out ahead of time for those brackets and wanted to know how many were in each weight class. And that was still an issue that we ran into. And maybe I don't know if we're a little ahead of the curve with mandating it for girls at this point, but I mean, at some point that's where we're going to be. So I'd probably rather be ahead of the curve than behind the curve. I'm going to let John jump in here.
In 2 years, when we have 2 classifications, I think it's something we can revisit. Like Sandra was saying, if the size of the regions gets smaller, and depending on the number of weight classes we have. But going into next year, we're going to have the same number of teams we had this year, but I'm guessing we'll probably have more wrestlers. So it's a very difficult conversation to have when I get the phone call from an athletic director or superintendent, and their kid didn't have the opportunity to get that wrestle back. It hurt my stomach. It didn't feel good. Didn't feel right. So I would really implore that this is something that we change for next year for sure, and then we can revisit if and when region sizes change for classifications.
I think the other thing to think about is the quality of wrestling that you're going to get out of most of the kids when they have a second day. When you're asking kids to wrestle 5-6 matches in a day versus 2 one day, 3 to 4 in another, whatever it be, you're going to get better wrestling out of all of your competitors, and you're just going to see better results out of everyone.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hey, this is Rick out of Fort Lupton. Again, it's that equability piece too, right? And we could get into some really sticky waters there if we're affording boys the opportunity and then denying it to our young ladies. And like I said, I think, again, if it's a possibility, we have to give them that opportunity, right? And again, I would hate to see that. And We have not fell victim to it yet, but it's just time before somebody does. And then to have that conversation with a parent, I could see first thing, you better lawyer up, so got to give them those opportunities.
Thank you, Rick.
Will specific times be set that say, hey, every region weighs in at 2 and starts at 4 on Friday, and same on Saturday? Or is that just kind of a tentative schedule that CHSAA puts out, each year to follow? Just curious.
If it were up to me, I'd do a tentative schedule.
Did you guys hear John there? I didn't switch the mic around.
It's very difficult at times to make sure everyone is on lockstep when we have 20 regions. Things happen, and as a tournament director, if I'm running 20 minutes behind or something like that, I start freaking out. And I think we need to give a little bit of grace. I think we can create a skeleton structure of what a 2-day tournament should look like, and hopefully have everything rolling. But Jeff, you're the region at Lakewood went a lot longer than some of the other ones. Things happen, so it's difficult at times just to get everything in lockstep.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. I do believe we already have, do we have a motion on the table or yes? Okay. All right, at this time, if there's no further discussion, I will call for a vote. Sean?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Pat? Rick?
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Yep, Pat's a thumbs up. Rick's a yes. Tom?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Curtis? Yes. Okay. All right. We're on to page 3 of the agenda. We are moving along, folks. All right. There is a proposal that it looks like that Jeff put forward in regards to wrestlers that are entered into a 2-day tournament and eliminated on the first day. So I will turn that over to Jeff to speak to that.
Yeah, and this was done, and I might just take care of itself now that we have 12 tournament dates anyway. But the idea, some coaches brought it to my attention that, hey, they'd like to see something in writing. But before, the 12 and 10, I think everybody realized it was passed. But, kid goes to a 2-day tournament, they go 0-2 or 1-2, and then they're out on Friday. And now, because of the point system, the way it was, or the number of events, they weren't able to go to another tournament that following Saturday or something like that. So I'm not sure if we need to discuss it anymore, because we did have the 12 tournament dates. I'd be open to, hear what anybody else said, but I think their thoughts were didn't want to punish a kid. Maybe, they give them a chance to go get some more competition versus sitting at home or just, sitting at the event overnight, the next day or something. So.
Thoughts, comments for Jeff? Jeff, I think with that, in my thought process, and I've been through the points change and the tournament days and all of those things and how cumbersome it's been to calculate points for kids and to keep track of all those things. I would ask and see if the added 2 points into the tournament days, if that's an okay solution before we start adding in another way to try and help track or keep track of kids' days that they use. I think simple is sometimes a little bit better if we can go that route. Definitely understand where you're coming from with that kid getting eliminated and it's using a second tournament day for them. Not into limiting opportunities for kids either. But just knowing the history of trying to keep track of all those points and days and things for kids, it's been difficult in the past.
Yeah, and you know, the problem, or not the problem, but the question comes up too is how do you get them entered if they go out on a Friday on a quick turnaround on a Saturday? Because, you know, entries are early, you know, have to be done at a certain time. So it might be a moot point. I just, like I said, it was brought to my attention, so I would address it. But I think you're right. I think that actually, if it is a possibility to you know, with track and you know, you communicate with a tournament director or whatever, hey, can I enter this kid? Is it too late? But it'll be kind of on the coaches with the 12 and 10. So thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, we do have two things left on our discussion plate here. We have a proposal that was put forth on the weigh-ins at state from Jason. And so I will turn it over to Jason to speak to this one.
Thanks, Travis. I know you kind of alluded to the fact that the state tournament's going to run by John, and this is more a procedural logistics type issue, but just wanted to bring it up. Basically just brought forth to ensure that all wrestlers are weighed in fairly without the opportunity for manipulation or unfair advantage. Basically the pros would be just more transparency with the weigh-in process for everyone involved. And then, you know, it just alleviates those things you hear year in and year out of things happening with different weigh-ins and things like that. So just more transparency would be basically what it's about.
Okay. Appreciate that. That's definitely a high stress point when it comes to the tournament, and we want to make sure we're getting that right. Thoughts, discussions. I think it is okay for us to discuss these things and kind of give John, you know, maybe our thoughts on it. So if there are specific comments or concerns that address this, you know, I think now is an appropriate time to go ahead and give John that feedback.
I don't have like specific stuff. Mine was just kind of that. I know from a lot of the coaches we talked to kind of following state wrestling, just that the weigh-in process was a little bit of a mess, at least at the 2A, 3A level.
I think too, with the added of the girls weighing in during 2A, 3A, you got a lot of those coaches and teams that are traveling on one bus in the 4A, 5A realm. And I felt like it was a little more congested than in the past. And maybe this is something that helps alleviate a little bit of that, you know, because I remember somebody getting on the microphone about Adams City, but their girls were weighing in and they had one bus. And so their boys came in. I guess the other option is their boys have to sit on the bus until it's their turn to come in. But maybe this might be something to help alleviate a little bit of that congestion.
Okay, let John jump on here.
Yeah, I got a lot of feedback about weigh-ins and stuff. It's definitely something we'll look at, and I've connected with Jason already about maybe some things we can do next year to kind of speed through the process. The last thing we want to do on the first day, actually any day of the tournament, is add undue stress to coaches. And when you're struggling to get in the building and kind of running around a little bit, not sure what's going on with the weigh-ins, those are areas that we will definitely improve on and hopefully make much smoother for next year. I think we have some ideas in place that'll be very helpful and be appreciated by coaches and athletes as well, and get kids out of there if they need to go eat after weigh-ins and just make the whole process smoother and quicker.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mind, I would like to just address that a little bit with you, John, and the committee. It's just everybody is, you know, I think there's been an issue a couple times where, you know, if the weigh-ins, you know, people not making it on time, and again, part of this can be traffic, and there's a lot of issues that you just addressed, John. So I'm just wondering if that is something that will be addressed as well, as that, you know, all 105 pounds or 106, 160, whatever the weight, once you're there, the weigh-in, is it closed? Is it, you know, we're going to allow guys to, you know, 15 minutes late because they were in traffic or whatever, you know, and that does happen. So you don't want to punish those because there are incidents like that. But, or circumstances, but you know, if kids are cutting weight somewhere else, is that an issue that we need to address? So.
For sure. And I think, you know, I think there is a difference between running late and what you talked about trying to make weight somewhere else. And when communication occurs prior, you know, and Basalt got stuck in Glenwood Canyon. They were very communicative with me, and we were willing to work with them. And if we needed to push their time back, we would. That's not an issue. But if there's just no show, no calls, that's a major difference. You know, I think we do want to open it up next year a little bit. And without giving away too much, that don't have all the structures in place, but we want to add scales. We want to possibly put things out on the floor if we can, and just make everything a lot more, I guess, transparent. And again, we want to improve the process and get kids in and out, and alleviate stress for the kids and the coaches.
So John, you think it'd be better, you have some solutions that, you know, I wouldn't necessarily want to tie your hands with by passing a proposal that locks you into one system. You think you have ideas that can work?
Yeah, I'm working specifically with Jason Humphrey on our committee through some things right now, and then we'll run them by our tournament committee. And Jason's got some great ideas. So I don't think, to be honest, yeah, I would agree. I don't think a proposal is needed. These are just things we want to do to fix the whole processes and fix the structures. So you know, make things better.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd want to tie your hands with that, you know, into one thing. So thank you.
I have
go ahead, Sandra.
Sorry, I have a quick question. So it's for John. So the process of everybody going through that same door, is that one of the things that they're going to talk about? That line of kids waiting at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning for security?
That's a tricky one because we are also, you know, Tom talked about getting our hands tied. We are tied up with a little bit with what the ball arena folks allow us to do and don't allow us to do. That's that first day. I'll take the blame for holding kids up. Second day, we had 2 metal detectors go down. But you know, I've already looked at the schedule for next year. We're going to increase the time difference a little bit between the weigh-ins, with still allowing our first group to get their proper warm-up times. But I think, you know, just opening the doors a little bit earlier will help as well. And you know, I'll plead a little bit of ignorance, not having gone through the process. It was eye-opening how many kids and coaches came through, and you know, we'll do better with that.
Okay, I was
But
just curious.
to answer your question, Sandra, I don't think there's going to be another entrance available for us.
Okay.
Part of the deal is if we open up other entrances, they're also going to have more workers there, and that also increases the cost of everything for every person they have there. So I think we can, you know, I think opening it up a little bit earlier, spreading the time between 2A, 3A girls and 4A, 5A will help as well. And I think also improving the actual weigh-in procedure and structure that we have in place should help with everything.
Okay, thank you.
We'll also do a better job of trying to communicate out that you cannot bring your crock pot of chili into Ball Arena through the metal detector. That slows things down as well. True story. True story. That's the first time we've seen that this year. Trying to smuggle in a crock pot of chili. Okay. Is it safe to say, though, that as a committee here, we would recommend to John that he continues to evaluate the weigh-in procedures, and if there's that we would strongly recommend and find a way to add a few more scales and maybe move that out to the floor? Does everyone kind of feel good about that?
Yes.
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 All right. So you have that recommendation from us, John. Again, another thing that was just somewhere buried in there amidst all the proposals and things like that. Again, just trying to make sure people's voices are heard and that nothing gets hopefully fallen through the cracks. There was a question about trying to change the order of state every other year, every couple of years, so that we don't always do the same lights to heavies at finals, just to try and change things up. So that's something that we've noted. If there's something that, again, a committee member feels strongly and wants to speak to right now, they can, but that is something that we noticed, and we'll have conversations with and just see how they want to move forward with that scheduling. Anything the committee really wants to speak to here?
Okay. It would definitely add a little more, excitement, I guess. If anybody watched the Big 12s, they didn't start at 125, this on Sunday, they started at 74, so they could end with a premier match at 165. There are some advantages to that. You feel sorry for kind of those heavier kids, as they're getting their awards, people are leaving except for the ones that are there to watch them, so there is that thought process. So I would be in favor withdrawing or randomly selecting somehow, hey, we're going to start it this way this year and move around. I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay. Jeff, from a coach's perspective, how much heads up would you want on that? Would you want to know before the tournament starts that this is what finals are going to look like this year? Or if we pick that on Friday night during the semis, would that be kind of exciting if, Friday night during semis, we reveal what the finals order would be?
Well, that's a good one. You would need to know. Man, I don't know. I'd have to think about it, to be honest. I guess, you think about some of the matchups that we've had these last couple of years, last year, at 4A when I'm sorry, I'm train of thought here. He was going for his fourth and he was upset. What a great match, right? So that could have been a premier match, so I don't know, but I think coaches, would like to know as early as possible, to prepare their kids that, hey, this is going to be a little bit out of order. We're going to start, at 190 this time instead of, 106. So probably the sooner the better as a coach, I guess.
Okay. Sounds good. Just a question.
I believe Division I, they do the same thing, and they'll announce it out, on all their social media, but I'll pay attention to how early they do when that finals match, what weight they're going to start on, and make sure I send it over to you guys to see when do they do it, 3 days in advance, the day of, or where it's at, for comparison.
Appreciate that, Curtis.
I think if the coach knows it's a random draw, I think that would be fine if you announced what weight exactly it was going to be at Friday night at the semis.
Go ahead, Jim.
I think it would have to be random, Jeff. I understand your thought about some premier matchups, but I don't want to be in a position or have our committee in a position where we're determining which matchups are better, because unless you want to give out your cell number and you want to take those calls.
Yeah, I was just using that as an example that, other tournaments that, like Coach just said, the national championships, they don't start at the same weight all the time. So I think it'd add a little more excitement. I do see what Ernie just posted. People are going to probably leave no matter what to try to beat traffic, but it wouldn't be the same people trying to leave all the time, when the heavyweights are ending or whatever. So.
Good thing just to talk about and get some point of views on. So
one coach just texted me Saturday morning of weigh-ins.
Saturday morning weigh-ins.
Saturday morning to win. That way they have all day.
I just figured semis wasn't exciting enough, and we needed one more thing to add into there to make it more exciting. Okay. That really takes care of our discussion items and things for the meeting. Is there anything else the committee really has before we move on to our final piece?
I just had one comment. I helped out with 2A regionals. I think the track wrestling component, if there was a way to have some sort of tutorial video for coaches on entering head-to-head, also making sure that they have their winning percentages and records correctly done before regionals. Because I know that helping with the 2A West Slope region there was a lot of mistakes that we caught. But if there was somehow to put together a tutorial video for coaches, and you send it out at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then with all your regional reminders, maybe that would help streamline that seeding process, and then also down the road as well. But that was just one thought, kind of hearing from a couple different coaches on that. Maybe that would help alleviate some of those concerns for the people that are having to seed the tournament, and then they don't have to go back as, hey, we sent it out, what you have to have done prior.
Okay. John thinks that there's some things available, and if not, he promises to do a quick tutorial to all coaches during his preseason meeting next year. He'll jump on and share his screen and show everybody what to do. Okay, anything else from the committee before we move to our last piece? All right, again, before we get to this, I just would again like to thank John for all of his hard work this year, and Sandy too. They've done a fantastic job of stepping in and helping wrestling go smoothly this year, and helping our state tournament go well. And I know that wrestling is in good hands for years to come. So I want to thank them. Committee, thank you for all of your hard work. Presenters, thank you for being here and being on the call with us today. And John will be in touch, committee, with next steps for our seating piece that we just need to wrap up here in the next few days. So watch your emails. You'll be getting information coming from him on that. Before we adjourn, couple things to note on our committee panel here. Sean did step in this year to cover the remaining part of a term. And so we are going to recommend that Sean stick on for another term because he's allowed to do so. And we like Sean, thinks he's done a nice job this year. And then Pat is in the same boat. Pat came in as a partial replacement. And so we will ask that Pat stay on as well. This is the final year for John from Durango. And then this is Matt's last year as well. So Matt, thank you for everything that you've done for the committee. And we greatly appreciate having a 2A voice on this panel and somebody that knows wrestling well and can speak to all concerns and specifically to 2A. So your voice has been valued these last few years. We will be looking for a couple of replacements. So if you know somebody that would be a good fit, you can send those names to John or myself. Again, trying to keep us spread out throughout the classifications and geography wise. So keep those in the back of your mind. Okay. John, do you have anything else before we move to adjourn?
Yeah, I just want to thank the committee as well. Appreciate all you've done. I want to especially thank Sandra for all her help, and Travis is just a huge crutch for me this year. Thank you. We still have a bunch of work to do, so I will be reaching out shortly. So thank you, and appreciate the season. Coaches, thank you for all you do as well.
Okay, with that, I need one final motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Tom.
I will second that.
All right, motion by Tom, second by Rachel. Everyone just give me a thumbs up. We're good to go. Thank you very much. If those of you are on spring break like I am, enjoy the rest of your spring break.